connected to iPhone.
Is there a principal reason why I should delete my social media? And if so, what is it?
There are two. One of them is for your own good, and the other is for society's good. For your own good, it's because you're being subtly manipulated by algorithms that are watching everything you do constantly and then sending you changes in your media feed, in your diet, that are calculated to adjust you slightly to the liking of some unseen advertiser. And so if you get off that, you can have a chance to experience a clearer view of yourself and your life. But then the reason for society might be even more important. Society has been gradually darkened by this scheme in which everyone is under surveillance all the time, and everyone is under this mild version of behavior modification all the time. It's made people jittery and cranky. It's made teens especially depressed, which can be quite severe. But it's made our politics kind of unreal and strange, where we're not sure if elections are real anymore. We're not sure how much the Russians affected Brexit. We do know that it was a crankier affair than it might have been otherwise.
You say it's bad for me as an individual. Is it bad for me because I'm addicted? Have I become chemically hooked?
You have. The founders of the great Silicon Valley spying empires like Facebook have publicly declared that they intentionally included addictive schemes in their designs. Now, we have to say, this is what I would call almost a stealthy addiction. It's a statistical addiction. What it says is, we will get the broad population to use the services a lot. We'll get them hooked through a scheme of rewards and punishment. And the rewards are when you're retweeted. The punishment is when you're treated badly by others online. And then within that, we'll very gradually start to leverage that to change them. So it's this very kind of stealthy manipulation of the population. So it's not as dramatic as a heroin addict or a gambling addict, but it is the same principle.
But who's doing the manipulating? I mean, there isn't some master sort of Wizard of Oz sitting behind a screen, is it?
Well, this is the peculiarity of the situation. The people who run the tech companies like Google and Facebook are not doing the manipulating. They're doing the addicting. But the manipulating, which rides on the back of the addicting, is the paying customer of such a company. So, and many of those customers are not at all bad influences. They might simply be trying to promote their cars or their perfumes or whatever. And indeed, I have sympathy for them because they're concerned that if they don't put money into the system, nobody will know about them anymore.
How is it different to just television advertising or billboard advertising or anything else?
The difference is the constant feedback loop. So when you watch the television isn't watching you. When you see the billboard isn't seeing you. And vast numbers of people see the same thing on television and see the same billboard. When you use these new designs, social media, search, YouTube, when you see these things, you're being observed constantly, and algorithms are taking that information and changing what you see next. And they're searching and searching and searching, and they're just blind robots. There's no evil genius here until they find those patterns, those little tricks that get you and make you change your behavior.
In terms of society, I mean, you threw in this, it's making people depressed. But is there any actual evidence for that?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a vast amount of evidence. There have been dozens of studies at this point, including studies released by Facebook scientists. So this is something we can call a consensus. And when Facebook releases such things, they say, oh, but we do all these good things too that balance it. But there's a general acknowledgement that depression correlates. The scariest example is a correlation between rises in teen suicide and the rise in use of social media. And so, yes, unfortunately, this is real.
But are you sure you can blame it on social media? Is it not just those two things may have happened at the same time for other reasons?
Well, here's a distinction we have to make. It's very similar to the problem of global climate change. We can say statistically over the whole population, yes, the correlation is real. any particular person, of course, we can't. Just as we can't blame any particular storm on global warming.
But it's causality, isn't it?
It is causality, and this is something that's very well demonstrated. When the company's own scientists are publishing on this topic and come to the same agreement, I think it's time to say this is real.
Why have you sort of turned on your own kind, if you like?
I love Silicon Valley, and I do not at all feel that I've turned on my own kind. And just to be clear, I'm very much a part of this. I've sold a company to Google. I'm not in any sense an outsider. I believe that what we're doing is not in our own self-interest. Business interests are a part of society. If they destroy society, they destroy themselves. I believe it's very clear that we could offer all of the good things, and there are many, many good things in these services, and social media in particular. I'm convinced we can offer them without this manipulation engine in the background. There's a world of other business plans, and I think they'd be better for us. So I don't think we're being evil so much as we're being stupid.
When it comes to Facebook, has Facebook made itself safe yet? In terms of data harvesting and scraping and all of that?
Well, Facebook's fundamental design is one that is the business model is to addict you and then offer a channel to you to third parties to take advantage of that to change you in some way without you realizing it's happening. I mean, that's what it does. So I don't think any amount of tweaking can fully heal it. I think it needs a different business plan. I mean, it's very hard to throw a barrage of rules at somebody who's following certain incentives and then expect them to really make a difference.
So when Mark Zuckerberg says he's taking action and, you know, he regrets what's happened and all the rest of it, you're saying he can't make his own product a safe and desirable product?
I believe that as long as his business incentives are contrary to the interests of the people who use it, who are different from the customers, then no matter how sincere he is, and I believe he's sincere, and no matter how clever he is, he can't undo that problem. He has to go back to the basics and change the nature of the business plan.
And if he doesn't agree with that and says we're just going to carry on, how important is security of that data and the inability to repeat what has happened with Cambridge Analytica and all that kind of sort of data harvesting that went on?
I don't believe that what happened with Cambridge Analytica is the worst of it. The whole system is designed for this. Like, let's suppose that Facebook reforms itself so that the next Cambridge Analytica can't get access to that data. They can still get access to the same results because the service Facebook offers is exactly what Cambridge Analytica. Yeah, I mean, this is, there are bad actors are able to use Facebook in ways that Facebook can't understand because the way the service is designed is fundamentally to be manipulative. So I think the data protection idea is a sincere and good idea, but it's certainly not adequate. It doesn't address the core problem, which is the manipulation engine. And as long as that is there, a bad actor can find a way to utilize it. So to me, this concern about data protection, while laudable, doesn't address the core problem.
Do you think they're all as bad as each other? I mean, why is something like YouTube, which is basically just a way of watching video, bad for you?
YouTube is not necessarily bad for you. Remember, this is a statistical distribution, so for some percentage of people...
Yo, Mark Zuckerberg is like a fucking Isaac Newton, yo. Not Isaac Newton, like a motherfucking... Damn, who the dude I'm thinking of, yo? Thomas Edison. He's like a Thomas Edison, and Zuckerberg is going to go down in history like a Thomas Edison. Now, Edison really didn't fucking... This motherfucker ain't invent the light bulb. You know what I'm saying? He took different designs from different people and marketed that shit in a certain way, yo. And goddamn, like his battle between the AC and DC current, this motherfucker just was able to market that shit, market his brand better than somebody else's brand, but at the same time, still kind of come up with a new way to use the shit he already had access to. That's like Zuckerberg, yo. This mother, like, he ain't come up with the internet or code writing or none of this shit. He just took all of that and looked at a way to motherfucking, well, from the history of that shit, what I understand, like, he really didn't plan on this shit being as big as it was. It was just some goofy shit for him and his homeboys to do to troll motherfuckers. That was before trolling was even a thing, but it was just like, I don't know, like stupid ass surveys. Who's the hottest chick on campus? Who's the hottest dude on campus? And that shit grew from like a little chat room to like a college campus thing. And only if it's just a few motherfuckers on that shit, then it just expanded and expanded. Now motherfuckers on different college campuses. It was like some college shit. Some dumbass college kid shit. And then that shit just never stopped growing, yo. And now how he's marketing Facebook. But this motherfucker, that last interview when he went in front of Congress, had to answer all them questions about information and data harvesting and shit like that. It was like, you can see this motherfucker realize he has created a monster and it's out of his control now. You know what I'm saying? It's like he don't really do much anymore. You know what I'm saying? He's probably the majority shareholder in the company, and I'm sure he still has a major part in creative design and software update and implementation of new algorithms and shit like that. But Facebook is so big, it's a corporation. They went public, they have shareholders. You know what I'm saying? You got teams of motherfuckers at multiple locations running this shit. And that motherfucker, he's, like I said, he know he's created a fucking monster. Like, Facebook is a goddamn beast of a beast. And it's the idea is so well thought out that everybody uses it. This is a global thing now. Like, if you go to Target.com, see, that's our domains were the .coms, and that was the main way to search for information. When this whole fucking World Wide Web was initiated. So you do www.http://target.com or whatever. It's like, wait a minute, what the fuck? Or no, it's http://www. It's like, damn. So you do all this fucking domain searching, but like these apps, like Facebook has broken it down where you don't, you know what I'm saying, it's so simple. And like I say, if you go to Target.com, McDonald's.com, SearsandRoebuck.com or whatever, Zales.com, I guarantee you somewhere on their website it'll say like our page on Facebook. And that's even major corporations. Pepsi.com, like us on Facebook. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know, like our internet is changing, our social media is changing, the way we connect digitally is changing, and Zuckerberg is basically one of the founding fathers of this shit. You know what I'm saying? And like 100 years from now, they're still going to talk about this motherfucker like, yo, you remember who invented Facebook? You know what I'm saying? There'll probably be quizzes on that shit, on tests and shit. You know what I'm saying? at least know something about the motherfuckers who got this shit started, yo. Like the young boy who did Instagram. This motherfucker like a billionaire. He in his 20s, a billionaire. You know what I'm saying? Just for having that right idea in this digital age, yo. And it's still like, and when you think about it, it's like, oh, what else can be done? You know what I'm saying? But there's fucking hundreds of thousands of fucking apps. And we have, like Google, YouTube, Yahoo, motherfucking Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And like there's some fucking major heavy hitters in the digital world, but who knows what the next big idea is going to be or where it's going to come from. You know what I'm saying? Something else that we just can't imagine is going to make it just a little bit more easier. Google tried that Google Glass and all that shit, but I think the next steps is like wearable tech, digital clothes, fucking augmented reality. Whoever can fucking really, really achieve that first on a consumer level and have some type of augmentation for reality device that is light and portable. Clothes that charge your digital devices or clothes that integrate your devices. All that's going to be the next phase, and then the phase after that shit is going to be the singularity, where we integrate our technological hardware directly into our biological hardware. And that's gonna be fucking crazy. But yeah, social media is, I don't know. I don't think I let that shit control my life though. I'm on social media all the time. And I think that shit is amazing if you use it as a tool. You know what I'm saying? The internet is a fucking tool, and everything in the internet toolbox. Well, the internet is a toolbox, and everything on the internet is a tool. All you gotta do is use, you know, the different outlets as fucking tools. I connect with so many people around the world, from places I've never been and languages I can never speak. You know what I'm saying? But just by social media, translator apps and things like that, I can have whole intellectual conversations with a motherfucker who don't speak English, and I don't speak Arab or Japanese or whatever. I got a couple of French homies, don't speak no English. I don't speak no French, but we have great ass, funny ass conversations, yo. You know what I'm saying? I got art in fucking Australia, in Japan, Amsterdam, from YouTube. I still find that shit amazing, because I didn't have this shit as a child. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like I'm about to miss out on some shit. I really wish I was born like 40 years from now. I wish I was born like 40 years in the future. You know what I'm saying? And then like all this shit would be some old outdated shit. Like, oh, yeah, yeah, I remember when they came out with VR like 40, 50 years ago. Like imagine the VR they're going to have then. How much advanced self-driving cars will become. You know what I'm saying? Better healthcare. Hopefully, we won't nuke ourselves off the face of the earth in the next 40 fucking years. But I feel like we were right at the cusp of this. They're calling it the fourth industrial revolution, and we're going to see some type of singularity happen in the next century. We're going to see some type of artificial general intelligence in the next century. We're going to What's good? What's good, yo? Yeah, we're going to have the science so down packed in the next 100 years where, if you got the money for it, motherfuckers can live like 200 years, 300 years with no fucking problem. You know what I'm saying? With no problem. And all that shit it's like literally around the corner. And it's, like I said, it's fucked up because the next 100 years is going to be some fucking amazing ass shit going on. So I'm working on this piece right here. Just basically, this is the underpainting, just the first layer. Is basically done. The background is black. I think I was gonna change the color, maybe, but I don't know. I'm actually thinking that I might just keep it black. I do a lot of paintings with black backgrounds, but fuck it, I like that shit. So I was thinking, oh, maybe I can do it like a deep reddish burgundy and kind of match the frills and fringe, but I was like, nah, the photograph is black and it looks good like that, so I think I'm gonna just keep it black. Oh yeah, art and education, man. Sometimes people would catch it when I'm just motherfucking rapping and all that other shit, but man, gotta get that education in there. You know what I'm saying? Every once in a while, it's a necessity. All right, so well, let's finish listening to this guy. So this guy right here, um, Jaron Lanier interviews on how social media ruins your life. And this dude is some Silicon Valley hipster kid, chubby white dude with dreads, some tech guy came up with the company, sold that shit to Google. You know what I'm saying? He's just like he's in the know. He's in there. He's been there, done that. You know what I'm saying? He ain't no new chump on the block. And he understands what is going on the inside of Silicon Valley and how uh, the corporations use social media to effectively brainwash you. You know what I'm saying?
Can't undo that problem. He has to go back to the basics and change the nature of the business plan.
And if he doesn't agree with that and says we're just going to carry on, how much of how important is security of that data and the inability to repeat what has happened with Cambridge Analytica and all that kind of sort of data harvesting that went on?
I don't believe that what happened with Cambridge Analytica is the worst of it. The whole system is designed for this. Like, let's suppose that Facebook reforms itself so that the next Cambridge Analytica can't get access to that data. They can still get access to the same results because the service Facebook offers is exactly what Cambridge Analytica. Yeah, I mean, this is, there are bad actors are able to use Facebook in ways that Facebook can't understand because the way the service is designed is fundamentally to be manipulative. So I think the data protection idea is a sincere and good idea, but it's certainly not adequate. It doesn't address the core problem, which is the manipulation engine. And as long as that is there, a bad actor can find a way to utilize it. So to me, this concern about data protection, while laudable, doesn't address the core problem.
Do you think they're all as bad as each other? I mean, why is something like YouTube, which is basically just a way of watching video, bad for you?
YouTube is not necessarily bad for you. Remember, this is a statistical distribution.
See, I hate to keep cutting this dude off, but I've never listened to this interview. I don't really know who this dude is, but That's what I'm saying. Like, YouTube can be bad for you, and I tell my son that. Like, yo, my son be watching like weird ass shit, yo, and I just gotta tell him like, bruh, you haven't really experienced life enough to understand how the world works on a personal level, in personal relationships and interactions with different people from different walks of life. But you're absorbing all of this supposed knowledge from a bunch of fucking weirdos with a camera. You know what I'm saying? And they'll tell you all kind of shit. And honestly, you don't have the mental faculties yet to decipher the bullshit. Simple as that. You know what I'm saying? Because they so much bullshit out there. That shit will confuse the fuck out of you. But you gotta, you know what I'm saying? It takes time and a different type of studying before you're able to really decipher and sieve through the fucking false information. What's real and what's not real. Because these kids will watch anything and everything and believe that shit. And it's like you really can't be like that. But I utilize YouTube all the time. Like now. You know what I'm saying? And I watch YouTube all the time. I call that shit YouTube University because you can almost learn anything on that shit. Use that shit as a tool. You know what I'm saying? Yo, I had a 2003 Oldsmobile Alero, right? So this motherfucker started overheating. I thought it was the thermostat. So, swapped the thermostat out. Shit ran good for a little while. Start overheating again. Like 2 days later, I'm like, what the fuck? So, thought it might be something with my radiator. I checked the radiator out. Nothing went wrong with the radiator. So I took this shit to a motherfucking shop. He did some kind of pressure test on the motherfucking engine, and he's like, dude, you got some kind of leak. He's like, it's probably just your gasket. I was like, what gasket? He's like, your lower manifold gasket probably is just old. And on these engines, the 3.2, like, you just need to change them shits out. It's like it'd be a motherfucking $2,200 job. Like, $2,200. It's like, I ain't got $2,200 to give you to fix this motherfucking car. Motherfucker, I go get me another used car for $2,200. I wanted to keep that shit though. So I was like, nah. So I checked at another mechanic. He was like, oh, I can do it for 19. I was like, 19? I was like, damn, still don't really want to spend that much. You know what I'm saying? So I had the damn manual to the car. I'm saying, you know what? My uncle got all the tools in the world. You name a tool, he got that bitch. This motherfucker probably got some shit we probably go dig an oil well and start drilling tomorrow. This motherfucker got everything, bruh. But anyway, I had the manual, so I went to the AutoZone and I got the mechanics book for my car. Every nut and bolt. And then I sat down and I YouTube how to change lower manifold on Oldsmobile Alero. Video came right up. Yo, this motherfucker walk you through this shit step by step by step by step. He said a good mechanic can probably do this job in about 6 hours. Take everything apart, put the new gasket in there, put everything back together, Probably about a 6-hour job. It took me about 11 hours, but I did that shit. And my car ran good for another like 2 years. I kept that car for like another 2 years. But the same issue came back, I think, because the head gasket was warped. I didn't fucking get it planed down. Like, the mechanic told me, it's like, dude, if it's been overheating like that, it's like your heads are probably warped. So you want to change the gasket and get the heads planed down so that they're level again. So I didn't do that part. I was like, fuck. But it still ran for another 2 years. And that was because of YouTube. Use that shit as a tool. I wanted to start taking better. Well, this isn't a picture that I took. But I took this picture though. And I wanted to start taking better photos. And so I got me a nice camera and really didn't know how to use that bitch. And the manual's like this thick. Start reading through it. And it's helpful. You know what I'm saying? But it's so long and tedious and technical. And so fuck that. So I YouTube how to use Canon Rebel T3. Tutorials out the ass. You know what I'm saying? YouTube University, man. You can learn anything on that shit. Or you can watch some motherfuckers talk about the earth is flat and Obama is a shape-shifting alien. You can listen to that shit all day. You know? Or you can use that shit to watch a motherfucker with dreads paint some art. You know what I'm saying? This is however you want to do it, man. You know what I'm saying? You gotta use that shit to your advantage, not your disadvantage.
Which is basically just a way of watching video bad for you.
YouTube is not necessarily bad for you. Remember, this is a statistical distribution, so for some percentage of people, it'll have an effect of making them crankier around election time and feeling needier around the time they might be making a purchase and so forth. And the way it works is that all the data Google can get on you, much of which comes from just your email or whatever else it might be, is fed into an engine that compares you with other people who share some similar traits. And YouTube's ordering of videos that are presented to you is designed to, on the one hand, maximize your engagement so you won't stop watching, but that's achieved not just by observing you, but by a multitude of people who are similar to you. And then when you do get an ad, it's contextualized in a way that has been shown to be effective, not only for you, but for this whole population. So it's this giant statistical thing. And it's bad for you because it leeches your free will, it makes you cranky, it makes the world a little darker because you're not perceiving reality clearly anymore. It's being manipulated, it's being tricked in a way. The people who are paying or maybe not paying, just using the system to, in a clever way to get at you, are not necessarily pleasant people. They're sort of the worst actors in some cases.
But don't some users think, look, I can handle advertising. You know, I know what I'm doing here. I'm getting a free service. And, you know, they think they're manipulating me, but I know what I'm doing.
The problem is that behaviorist techniques are often invisible to the person who's being manipulated. And this has a long history. This has been done for a long time. It used to be that the only way to be subjected to continuous observation and modification was to either be in an experiment. You could be in the basement of a psychology building and have students tweaking you for their projects, or you could join a cult, or you could be in an abusive relationship. I mean, this has been done before, and often the people who are in these situations do not realize it's happening to them. In fact, the whole point is that it's sneaky. It's a mechanical approach to manipulating people, and because it's so algorithmic, it doesn't involve direct communication, and people don't get the cues to understand what's happening with them.
Why do you think social media has had the effect on politics that it has? You know, is it because of the way people respond to things on social media?
Well,
I think it should be illegal for politicians to use social media. You want to reach your constituencies? Do it grassroots. Fuck that. Get out and do some fucking footwork. You want to talk to people in mass? Go fucking hold a conference somewhere at a lecture hall and come talk to your people in person and meet them. All that tweeting and shit. Fuck that shit, man. Now you seem just as fake as everybody else on that shit. I don't know. I find that shit really odd. That's the one part of social media I don't like. That shit is I don't know. Social media, not political media. Now if you're in a political office, you shouldn't use that shit like that. Right? The world is changing. And them motherfuckers. That's why a lot of the time, like, I don't know, man. I'm still like a news kind of guy. I don't watch the news like that very often unless someone I know, suggests a news clip to watch. But as far as being on like Twitter and all this other shit, following these fucking political people, even more political people I like, I'm pretty sure like well, there's not a lot of political people I like. I don't know. Does Ron Paul have a Twitter? You know what I'm saying? This motherfucking what's his name? I don't know, man. What's the president of Canada? Trudeau. Trudeau probably got a Twitter. I'm not following that motherfucker though. That motherfucker say Trump. He said Trump a goddamn liar. Yo, how you beefing with our neighbors to the north? Canada don't never fuck with nobody. Now Trump about to set their ass up for some goddamn extra taxes and shit. Man, these motherfuckers ain't playing that shit, man. Ain't nobody want to be America friend after a while. You'll watch.
I'd like to give you a slightly detailed answer as quickly as I can. And that is that in traditional behaviorism, you would give an animal or a person a little treat like candy or maybe an electric shock, and you'd go back and forth between positive and negative feedback. And when researchers try to determine whether positivity or negativity is more powerful, they're roughly at parity. They're both important. But the difference with social media is that the algorithms that are following you respond very quickly. They're looking for the quick responses. And the negative responses, like getting startled or scared or irritated or angry, tend to rise faster than the positive responses, like building trust or feeling good. Those things rise more slowly. So the algorithms naturally catch the negativity and amplify it and introduce negative people to each other and all of this. And so what this does is it means that the algorithms discovered there's more engagement possible, say, by promoting ISIS and promoting the Arab Spring. And so ISIS gets more mileage. Or promoting the Ku Klux Klan and Black Lives Matter. Now, in the big picture, it's not true that negativity is more powerful. But if you're doing this very rapid measurement of human impulses instead of accumulated human behavior, then it's the negativity that gets amplified. So you tend to have elections that are more driven by rancor and abuse, and you tend to have outcomes that are kind of crazy.
And so the effect on the media we consume, the news, as well, is also alarming, because then it'll be the news that makes people angry that is the news that gets seen in the future or now, rather than, a more balanced diet of what's really going on in the world.
Well, I think what goes on a show like this is that you have a bit of a longer time horizon by which you measure success. So you have to impress your viewership enough to tune in, but this is over a process of days and weeks and months and years, and you build up a sense of rapport with your viewership, right? If you're an algorithm that's just looking at instant responses, you don't get that. It's just like, how did I engage this person? And it'll be You'll find that engagement more often by irritating people than by educating them.
And so, is that how you create Trump? Or Duterte, or any of the other populist leaders who are doing very well at the moment, partly from the internet?
I have never known Trump, but I have met him a few times over a fairly long period, over 30 years actually, through different circumstances. And I will say that while I never would have voted for him as president, and I always thought he was somewhat untrustworthy and a bit of a showman and a bit of a scammer, he never lost himself and became so strangely insecure and so weirdly irritable until he had his own addiction, in this case to Twitter. And it's really damaged him. I mean, I view Trump in a way as a victim.
Really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. His character has been really damaged by his Twitter addiction.
Because of the reaction he gets from each tweet.
Yeah, so you know what happens in addiction is the addict becomes hooked not just on the good part of the addiction experience, but on the whole cycle. So a gambler is not just addicted to winning, but to this whole process where they mostly lose. And in the same way, the Twitter addict or the social media addict becomes addicted to this engagement, which is often unpleasant, where they're engaged in these really abusive exchanges with other human beings. And only once in a while is that, you can watch Trump, like every once in a while there will be this tweet where somebody likes him, and that's when he gets his little, we call it in the trade the dopamine hit. That's what it's called on Facebook, for instance. He gets this little dopamine hit, and then he dives in for more negativity and things, then he gets it again. And you can see the addiction playing out.
And do you think it's possible to create a do-gooding social network?
Yes, I'm absolutely positive. And the way to do it is to have a different business model where so right now we've created this bizarre society that's unprecedented where if any two people wish to communicate over the internet, the only way that can happen, the only way it's financed is through a third party who believes that those two can be manipulated in a sneaky way. It's an insane way to structure civilization. So we can keep all the good stuff, and there is good stuff on social media, of course. We can keep all that and just throw away the manipulation business model and substitute in a different business model. And there are many alternatives that would be better. They just have to be honest. It could be a paid service like a Netflix, where you're paying for it, you're the genuine customer. It has to keep your interest. It could be like a public library. It could become a public thing that isn't commercial at all. That's an option. But what we did in Silicon Valley is we wanted it both ways. We wanted everything open and free, but we wanted hero entrepreneurs and hackers. And so the only way to get that was this advertising thing that gradually turned into the manipulation engine as the computers got faster. And this weird business plan, once you can see that there are alternatives, you realize how strange it is and how unsustainable it is. This is the thing we must get rid of. Keep all that and just throw away the manipulation business model and substitute in a different business model. And there are many alternatives that would be better. They just have to be honest. It could be a paid service like a Netflix, where you're paying for it, you're the genuine customer. It has to keep your interest. It could be like a public library. It could become a public thing that isn't commercial at all. That's an option. But what we did in Silicon Valley is we wanted it both ways. We wanted everything open and free, but we wanted hero entrepreneurs and hackers. And so the only way to get that was this advertised both ways. We wanted everything open and free, but we wanted hero entrepreneurs and hackers. And so the only way to get that was this advertising thing that both ways. We wanted everything open and free, but we wanted hero entrepreneurs and hackers. And so the only way to get that was this advertising thing that gradually turned into the manipulation engine as the computers got faster. And this weird business plan, once you can see that there are alternatives, you realize how strange it is and how unsustainable it is. This is the thing we must get rid of. We don't have to get rid of the smartphone. We don't have to get rid of the idea of social media. We just have to get rid of the manipulation machine that's in the background.
Just one last thing as well that is also obsessing parents at the moment. Screen time itself, do you think that is a bad thing? Or is it just what's on the screen?
To be frank with you, I struggle with this question because I have an 11-year-old. And so I tend to think that manipulation time, when the kids are being observed by algorithms and tweaked by them, is vastly worse than just screen time by itself. So
Do you include video games in the social media, you know, the things that are manipulating them? Because they are similarly addictive, aren't they?
They're addictive, but not manipulative. Typically, now I'm not sure how evil we've become lately, because there might be some video games that are using behavior mod techniques for pay. That's conceivable. I can see how that could happen. If you're thinking about it out there, don't do it, okay? Find something better to do. But the mainstream video games are not doing that. They are addictive. So there are plenty of things that are addictive that aren't leveraging that for manipulation. So these are two different stages.
What do you think of Fortnite?
I have not played it.
You haven't played it? Because Fortnite is exactly that. It's getting people to pay for things within the game.
No, but see, the thing is, getting them to pay is still not manipulating them for a third party. That's getting them to buy stuff. I mean, Amazon does that to get you to buy stuff. All kinds of people do that. That might be annoying. You might object to it, especially if you feel your kids are wasting money. You might object to it. You might feel it's not an ideal example of human behavior and character, and maybe there could be a better business, whatever. But it's not directly manipulating you, say, to influence an election. It's not trying to change your behavior out in the larger world. And that's the thing that's really tragic about designs like Facebook and Google. They are succeeding at doing that.
But your advice tonight to everyone watching this is delete all your accounts.
I would like to make two very quick pitches on that account. One, if you're a young person and you've only lived with social media, your first duty is to yourself. You have to know yourself. You should experience travel. You should experience challenge to yourself. You need to know yourself, and you can't know yourself without perspective. So at least give it 6 months without social media and really quit them. Don't quit Facebook to keep another Facebook thing like WhatsApp, because then it'll still be spying and manipulating. Get rid of the whole thing for 6 months and know yourself, and then you can decide. I can't tell you what's right. You have to decide, but you can't until you know yourself. And then for the rest of society, I'd say, as long as we can have some small percentage of people who are off it, then the society can have voices to give perspective. If everybody's universally part of this thing, we cannot have perspective. We cannot have a real conversation. And it's too lonely right now. We need more people who are just outside of that loop, who are thinking without the manipulation. And I think we'll find it extraordinarily valuable to have them.
Are you just a New Age hippie? I mean, have you just been through the mill and kind of worked out, I want to check out of all this, and let's just stop?
Do I seem New Age to you?
I don't know. I mean,
here's what I'll tell you. The bind you put me in is that I'd be happy to trash the New Age and demonstrate that I'm not part of that manner of thinking. I'm certainly not. I hope I've come across as a non-utopian. But the problem is many of my friends in California are quite New Age, so I want to be kind to them.
You about to have me talking shit about my homies, man. I don't agree with them, but they still cool. All that New Age shit. Because I have some friends who are quite the New Age.
is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
The original Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
But that...
What's this young lady's name? I don't know. I'm working with a photography couple out of Atlanta, and this is some of their work. They do photography series based on kids with natural hair, and their studio is Creative Soul Studios, based out of Atlanta, and they just have all these different series of these beautiful black kids with these amazing hairstyles, you know, like just natural hairstyles and stuff. And it's I don't know, I've been following their stuff for a while, and some of their work always really, I mean, all of their work is beautiful, but a few of them really stood out, and I asked if I could use, you know, some of their photographs for my art. It was like, yeah, I don't know, we don't normally let people use our shit, you know what I'm saying, because they're professionals, their shit is in magazines and things like that. And it was like, I don't know about that. And it was like, I guess they checked out some of my art. It's like, you know what, you do got some nice paintings. We'll let you use some of our photographs if you give us a print. I was like, that's all? Hells yeah. I was like, they wanted a print? Thought they was gonna charge me like $700 to use that shit or something. But I want to ask them if I can do some more of their stuff. Like, if you look at their photographs, my God, yo, these things are amazing, amazing. And I want to paint more of their stuff. And I'm gonna say, well, how about if I do a series of 5? If you let me paint 5 of them, I'll let you choose one of the original paintings you want for yourself out of the 5. You know they're going to get the best one, but still. I should have put this on my glass, or at least used a brand new palette. This might have a little trash in it. Ugh. Be sitting here picking paint. Hate picking paint.
Was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the 4th industrial revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this 4th industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device, it gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain and enables us to really, truly be able to realize an identity that is aspirational.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain, on the genome, on biological aging, and when the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
We need a different economic model. And by that I don't mean capitalism versus communism. What I'm talking about is a shift in the system along the lines of the two big changes that happened in the 20th century, Keynesianism, with a much greater focus on health and education and the role of government working with business, and then a reaction against that in late century to neoliberalism, where the focus was on free markets, freedom of the individual, and getting governments out of the way. We need to shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet, that will live within planetary means, that will be fairer, and that will be focused as its key goal, not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being. And history tells us that a value shift is triggered by creation of a new story about how we want to live.
I see the circular economy as something which fits very closely with mankind's goal to be innovative and creative and to always progress. We can use asset tracking, we can use IT, we can use 3D printing to enable this different economic model to recover materials, feed them back into the economy, and really to decouple growth from the resource constraints we have.
The reason we live in cities is not different today than it was 10,000 years ago. Even if we have got networks connecting us, we still want to have places where we meet in person. So this means the place where we work and the place where we live are much closer to each other, a city where we don't need to have big supply chains in order to produce things, where many things can be sourced locally thanks to 3D printing and robotics. So if we're able to do something to transform cities, to make it more efficient, then the impact can be huge.
Think about the prospect of getting rid of plastics. We must not only be inspired or informed by nature, but actually use natural organisms with which to products and building parts. Only instead of varying material properties, we're varying biological functionality.
Design is critical today because it's the first signal of human intention. So the question of adding quality to quantity, but isn't a matter of simply circulating things that are potentially toxic. It's circulating things that are safe and healthy for all generations. So the goal is no longer, I want to be less bad, less monotonous, less unsafe, less unjust. It's really about a diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, clean soil, clean energy.
Together we're fighting to preserve our fragile climate from irreversible damage and devastation of unthinkable proportions.
If we think about the original Industrial Revolution, it was an energy revolution. I like to think of it as a kind of bookending of a period in human history during which we used fossil fuels, and it worked very well for us for a long time. But now we have to bring that to an end. We have energy technologies that can power our civilization: solar, wind, biomass. So then the question is, well, how do we get good integration? Maybe the wind is blowing in Denmark, the sun is shining in Germany, and now you can move that electricity through an integrated grid. You can supply energy to everyone who needs it, and you can supply energy at all times.
Walking around, you do see different stuff as far as like the body marriage line. They use a lot of things that help them lift up and move things to the car. You just sit there and, you know, program something, and it has its own set mind to go ahead and do everything. And then as humans, we just come in and take the extra steps to help the technology.
It's not the cure-all for everything. There's definitely a lot of things where people perform the operation better, but certainly for the right applications, robotics are a huge improvement for the process.
The prediction of 5 million jobs lost by 2020 to technology is serious, but it's not the main question. Construction, manufacturing, services, public health and education, these industries will still exist. The main question is, what will be the future of work? How will we define work? How will we share the wealth?
From the viewpoint of the labor or jobs, now we really need new education or new training.
We're working with a World in Motion and First Robotics, trying to encourage students from 3rd grade all the way up through the end of high school. We had students make sailboats, and then we had them race them, and so they could see how quickly they could move. And they
Yo. What up, man? What happened? Who, me? I got FMLA. Yeah. Yeah, so you should get paid for it. Huh? Wait a minute. You only got paid $25? $45? Did you tell them that? Did you tell them that you're using FMLA days? What the fuck? Call at payroll? Yeah, I agree. Say call Mike and payroll. Yeah, bro. Yeah, you should have got vacation days for that shit. Like you say, you said it exactly right. They use your vacation days first until it's gone because you got to still pay your health insurance for FMLA. You use all your personal time? And how many days you took off? You took the whole rotation? What was wrong? Yeah. Damn, dude. Well, you said it right, bro. Just keep trying to get in contact with Mike, yo, and let him know. And did you check your vacation on the time clock and see if you still got time? Not the one in our building. You gotta go to the other building. Yeah. Well, I check the time clock and make sure it still say you got vacation time on there. Because if it says you don't have vacation time and you didn't get paid, that means they took your hours and they really shit you. But then if you do got vacation time, you can prove to them like, yo, y'all should have used my hours. You working today? That's crazy, bro. Yeah, that's I don't know, dude. Yeah. Shit, no, I'm streaming live right now. I'm gonna hit you back in a little while. All right.
He immediately went back and started to say, oh, I saw what happened. I'm going to go change this or that. And that was
Yeah, they tried to get me out of a couple hours like that one time. I'm like, bitch, I'm on FMLA. Y'all tried to keep a half a day from me because I left a half a day early. Like, nah, y'all pay me for that. Take that hours. Let me get that.
third graders
I just given a prize to a kid, 18 years old, that has discovered something really very, very unique. Came up with how to get better productivity and better yields for seeds of corn. And so he basically came with the idea that if you would perforate these seeds, you would get more food. And you think about it and say, but he didn't go to university. So how does he get all that knowledge? And he told me, I mean, I've been watching YouTube since the age of 12, and I'm so interested that I've seen everything about it. I've read everything about it. The world is really open to learning. The thing is, how do you give the incentive to your kids to do that?
See, that's crazy. He been watching YouTube since he was 12. When I was 12, man, there was no YouTube. You know, that shit didn't exist, bruh. I can kind of, it's hard for me to remember exactly when I became aware of this shit. But it wasn't at no damn 12. In 12, I was in middle school. And in middle school, motherfucker, I was still reading Of Mice and Men. Ain't nobody was watching no shit on YouTube, I'll tell you that. I was still getting VHS cassettes and shit. I think like the last part of high school is when I became aware of YouTube, maybe. Like, I was like 16, 17. And then, shit, I didn't get on Facebook until I was like 20-something. Like, fuck that shit. I knew about Facebook for a while, like years, like 4 or 5 years. But they never really wanted to get on that shit. Then my ex was like, oh, you gotta have a Facebook page. Then I realized that shit just a stalker motherfucker. That's why now I just use Facebook for business.
It's this ability of digital technology to change outcomes, to truly empower people all over the world that can create a more equitable growth, because I think the world needs that.
Fourth industrial revolution has the potential to make inequalities visible and to make them less acceptable in the future, and hopefully to gather and garner political support to take the necessary decision to reduce the gap.
Humans have always been using tools, but because of the recent advances in technology, we're beginning to have machines that can augment us in all sorts of interesting ways.
I was the first person in the world to be able to voluntarily move my legs while stepping in a robot by exciting the nervous system using electrical stimulators directly onto the spine. We believe that a cure will be possible if enough of the right people have the will to fast-track a cure for paralysis.
We take two things from the patients. First, we take a three-dimensional X-ray, and we extract the three-dimensional data out of that so we can make a perfectly shaped puzzle piece. And then we also take a sample of fat tissue from the patient so that we can extract the stem cells out of those. And we use those stem cells with this three-dimensional scaffold that we fabricate, and after 3 weeks, we have a piece of living bone that's ready for implantation.
Being able to use genome editing to understand the genetic changes that lead to cancer, and technologies like drug delivery,
I'm telling you, in the next century, motherfuckers gonna be living to be like 200-300 years old, yo. They growing bones, they growing organs, they can get the stem cells back, you know what I'm saying, yo? The motherfucking, they're looking at the fucking, on gene editing. They got this shit called the CRISPR system. CRISPR makes gene editing so fucking easy for these motherfuckers now, yo. And then they're looking at extending a part of the fucking a part of the DNA code that fucking just keeps making your cells regenerate. You know what I'm saying? Man, this shit, hey, the next 100 years is gonna be crazy. If motherfuckers can just stop fighting wars and stop worrying about who making nukes and all this other shit, man. Put y'all energy into the fucking sciences, man. Make this world better for everybody. Oh, my Instagram page, the shit, bruh. You ain't never seen so many black, beautiful people.
Molecules into particular types of cells. There's a lot of excitement about being able to move much more quickly on this disease.
One of the things that I think is so essential to free and open societies is freedom of thought. And up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotion, we have to create a space that enables people to think freely, to think divergent thoughts, to think creative thoughts. And in a society where people fear having those thoughts, the likelihood of being able to enjoy progress is significantly diminished.
We need to take responsibility at every level of society, from the individual and the personal to the institutional to the global, to adapt to these technological challenges and changes, which are redefining what it means to be human, what it means to work, what it means to be completely embedded in this world.
People always ask me if I'm an optimist or a pessimist. The technology exists, but how do we get it and implement it at the scale we need at a price that people around the world can afford?
Even though we have everyday problems we have to solve, we have to find a way to lay the foundations for the innovations of tomorrow.
I'm telling y'all, man, look up CRISPR gene editing. That shit'll blow your fucking mind, yo.
So it's really good to be here today to talk to you about intelligent assistance and also authentication and identity. And I'm putting this in the context of what the World Economic Forum has been recently published. In fact, Professor Klaus Schwab wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And what I'm going to be doing today is talking about this from the point of view of not just the technology, but the implications to business, the implications to society, to personal data, identity, and the role that we all play in this industry, because we are actually at a crossroads internationally. And just as a bit of background, you might notice from my accent, I have a rather strange accent. So I'm a British citizen. I live part of the year in the UK. We have offices in the UK. But I also live in Australia and New Zealand. I sit on the board of some of the largest brands in the world, like Sky Television. I sit on the boards of a major bank, as well as a healthcare company. And I see this from both sides. I see it both from the branding perspective of how companies are trying to leap the chasm to be relevant in the new fourth industrial revolution. But I also run my own company where we are at the forefront of making that real. And so what I will be doing today will be giving you this from a couple of perspectives. What it's like in the boardroom, what it might be like in your day-to-day jobs, and we'll talk a little bit about that from a branding perspective, and also real-life examples of where we've gone live in the world, and you can start to see how this all becomes real. But let's define what fourth industrial revolution is. It is effectively a convergence, and you can almost call it a perfect storm. And there is not one industry that is immune from this. So whether you are sitting in as an electricity utility, whether you're sitting here as a bank, whether you're even sitting here as representing government and citizens, or whether you're in any industry, retail, I could rattle off 27 different industries around the world, everyone is being affected by the fourth industrial revolution. And that perfect storm are things like artificial intelligence. A lot is being written about what is the future of work, what will the future of roles be. When we have algorithms, who are those algorithms working for? And we'll talk a bit about this in today's discussion. Intelligent assistants are the flip side of artificial intelligence, because all an intelligent assistant does is bring that artificial intelligence to the human to be able to get an outcome. Hope the sound doesn't do that too often. Clearly within all of that is Internet of Things. You then also have identity. Many of you are involved in identity and authentication. And in fact, the magic passwords that we have today, which are really tiresome when you're trying to remember too many of them, we will automatically be identified and authenticated in the fourth industrial revolution. And I'll show some examples of that. And then, of course, there are other more esoteric things like quantum computing, nanotechnology. All of these are coming together to bring the physical world and the digital world together. Augmented reality is part of that. Sensors are part of that. So if you start to think about the human body, how we have sensors in our hands that give input to our brain, intelligent agents are actually the brains of the planet. And the question is going to be, are these brains working for you, or are these brains working for someone else? And you better find out, because if they're working for someone who perhaps is working for a Russian oligarch out there trying to find out what you really are doing in terms of your banking data, you could be unwittingly talking to a chatbot that might in fact be working for the bad guys, not the good guys. And this is where authentication and identity of knowing who you're talking to both ways becomes very, very important. So this is what the fourth industrial revolution, and it's operating at an unprecedented velocity. So you thought that things were really, really busy in the last 27 years, and I thought life was pretty busy because I've been in the tech industry for 27 years and I've seen it all. Working for IBM and Dell and SAP, automating all these value chains. It is happening at an unprecedented velocity. Nobody will be exempt from what is happening now. And in fact, I was just saying to the Opus guys, even when we did this event in New York about 7 months ago, just look at how fast the world has changed and the dialogues we're having around intelligent agents and chatbots, how quickly that is surfacing. So I've talked about the disruption, but equally with disruption there comes opportunity. And in that opportunity, it means that if you can master this, if you actually understand what it is and you can figure out how to position yourselves well, you in fact can become one of the masters of the new universe that's emerging. And I'll talk to you a bit about some of the research that's being done by MIT that actually starts to put that into context for brands. And we personally do a lot of work with brands, helping them figure out where do they fit in this fourth industrial revolution. So the net of all of this, think about the world as a new global neural network, a new ambient intelligent layer where there will be no more logging into websites because they're just boring. Who wants to be on a static website? That's not personalized. Where you will not be downloading an app so much anymore. It's been proven scientifically that the average human being can cope with 9 apps on average. What you need intelligent ambience that actually does stuff for you. And I don't think there's going to be, one intelligent agent that will rule them all. I think there's going to be many of these intelligent agents out there, and these intelligent agents are all going to be talking to each other. You're going to have sensors, so you're going to have smart bottles, the tables are going to be smart, you'll be recognized when you walk through airports. This is what you call the end-to-end neural networks. So the sensors are almost like the sensors of your skin. The intelligent agents are like the brain. The authentication is going to be like the antibodies of what gets in, what gets to survive, and what doesn't get to survive. And so this is a reality that we're moving toward. So before I get into this talk a little bit more, though, I'd like you to kind of give yourself a little mental test. And this is called an agility test. Can I just ask for a show of hands, how many of you are not from the intelligent agent and industry, but you actually are working for brands? Can I just see a show of hands around the room to see how many real brand people we have? Okay, so we've got quite a few people that are brands. So obviously you're thinking about these things. So it's good that you're at a convention like this. So I'm going to ask you to pass 4 critical questions. These are almost like canaries in your coal mine. Are any of these canaries singing at the moment? And the first canary in your coal mine is, are you experiencing low single-digit growth? And I don't expect you to put your hands up to answer that question, because you might not want to answer that question, but just think about this quietly to yourself. If your business model is experiencing low single-digit growth and you're not growing the way you used to, that would be an indicator that you're probably not quite match fit enough in the fourth industrial revolution. You're kind of losing some relevancy for some reason out there in the market. The second one is, are your margins under pressure? So are you making the profits that you used to be able to make? Are your yield curves as good as they were? And sitting on the board of a bank, I can tell you the yield curves are nothing like what they used to be. It's tough being in the banking industry today, but just about every industry is tough. Whether you're a television company, whether you are an energy retailer, everyone is doing it tough. Margins are under pressure. Because there's a third question you have to ask yourself. Is your product or your service now becoming a commodity? And a lot of people are writing about the outcome economy. What's the outcome that the person wants? What are their jobs to be done? Because your product or your service on its own is a commodity. The outcome is, I don't want a mortgage, I want a home, and I want the things in my home. So think about the hole that you want to drill is not the drill bit. So it's never become more true than it is now. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that. So if you feel like your products and services are commoditized, you are definitely not match fit, and you haven't started to think about what is your new value proposition in the fourth industrial revolution. The next one is low net promoter scores and customer sat. You know, it's amazing to me how many of our of the brands that we work with really are trying to, drive up NPS. But it's amazing also that how many of them are in negative NPS. And just a few percentage points, to nudge it north, it's like, yay, we've won. But then they compare themselves to the next four in their industry, and they're all in negative NPS. So kind of something's missing there. So it's almost like, you've really got to figure out, again, the outcome. So what is it that creates value? So you can either be positioning yourselves today as winners or losers in this fourth industrial revolution. And so we call this the sort of like, the diamond is a little bit like a black hole. You can disappear into the black hole, or you can actually start to see some of the opportunities that I'll talk to you about today. So it's not all darkness and doom and gloom, but if you've said yes to any one of those four, or if you've said yes to all four, the chances are you're not that match fit right now in the fourth industrial revolution, and you need to start to think about where you're positioned, what your economic models are, what ecosystems could you do, and how would you use this technology to positively position yourselves in the world that is rapidly emergent. And as I said, this is exponential. This is not linear growth. This is happening exponentially. Further proof points, if you hadn't already believed me, Deloitte's shift report, the average lifespan of a company is down to 15 years and shrinking. We know that. It's been proven. Deloitte report on it every single year. Another one, the downgrade in return on assets. But it's not just return on assets being downgraded, it's even in banking, return on equity. So all of the returns, it's getting harder and harder to get the returns that we used to. It shows that the current model is under stress and pressure. McKinsey's, they're doing a lot of really good research here as well, and they are also talking about the fact that without any change, like if we didn't have the fourth industrial revolution, the world would be running out of growth. And part of the reason why that the world is under stress and pressure right now is because the third industrial revolution, which I'll talk to in a moment, actually has run out of steam. And I'll tell you why in a moment, but I'll give you a little hint. Because it was really mostly supply chain driven. It was actually producing as much as we could at the least possible cost with an adequate customer experience. And it was very much based around products and services. The world has shifted. It doesn't cut the mustard anymore. These next generations of millennials and kids that you're trying to interact with just are not interested in the cheesy old stuff that we throw out there anymore. So you have to rethink how we're going to go and actually drive the new growth in the market. McKinsey's another one here, that digital flows. What's interesting is that digital flows are having a larger impact now on GDP growth across borders than any other flow right now. So you start to see some of the early indications that data and data flows happening internationally, happening in a seamless way, but with security and authentication and all of the things that we talk about, because there's a lot of bad guys out there that want to do bad things with people's data. This is actually the source of where the growth and the opportunities come from. And you cannot do it at scale relying on big data. And I'll talk to you about that. You have to have intelligent agents out there on your behalf, actually giving you the scale and the velocity that you need to stitch together these new end-to-end outcomes that people want. So here's the world that we've actually come from. Now you might think that, oh well, that looks like a really, really old world. But I would say that a lot of our mindset of companies is still very much rooted in that world, where we actually, the first industrial revolution was very much around, great, we have machines, and initially they were steam driven. then what we did is we brought out production lines, and America was amazing at production lines. Is that me or is that you? All right. So production lines came out there. Electricity came within that. So think about the impact that electricity had on the world. It was like magic. Lights came on, we didn't have gas anymore, and we got into a completely new era. But a lot of our mindset is still very much driven by this. Where was the empowered consumer in this production line? I would say Ford was great. You could have any model as long as it was black. And then, of course, consumers got choice, and we can have any car almost that we want. So we still very much think about things in a mechanistic, little boxes, little rows, silos, data silos. We make the customers jump through how many hoops to come through all our multiple doors, because we still think in this mode. And the fourth industrial revolution actually changes that. And all we really did in the last 17 years was we automated that. So a lot of the ERP supplies, and I was the president and CEO for SAP for North America, what did we do? Is we took all of those really, really smart processes that we had and we put them on digital steroids. And what we did is we had websites, we did supply chain, we did MRP. So if we start to look at this, we automated it. So think about supply chain planning, MRP. We brought out CRM. 13 years ago was the last time we did that. But CRM was not about the customer. This was about putting people into pipelines, putting them into funnels. And then what we did is that these devices came out, we gave people apps, but we're still very much thinking in silos. Because even my world, my personal world, is siloed across how many apps? My fitness app, my energy app, my this app. And the world is actually getting very tired of apps. There's too many apps out there. And that's why intelligent agents are rising up, because intelligent agents are replacing the apps. Because what they're doing is they're able to create these seamless end-to-end outcomes for people. So here's what the fourth industrial revolution looks like. And I've talked a little bit about the neural network. So think about the companies out there that are putting sensors on everything. Beacons going everywhere. These sensors will be in airports. You'll be walking through an airport and your biometric identity, this is not future. This is not 10 years away. This is like less than 5 years away. People will know who you are. They'll know where you've been. They'll know where you are on the street. And then they'll be knowing what you're doing in your home. And the sensors, the mobile devices, you've got lots of good examples like the Alexas of this world, and a lot of the other little devices that are coming into your home, the Samsung TVs, all of these things. The question is, though, where is all that data going? Samsung TV is always on. And in fact, if you read the fine print, that data is going somewhere. When you have an argument with your wife, in front of your wife in the kitchen with the Alexa device, it's listening. Where is that data going? The biggest worry that I have with brands around the fourth industrial revolution is, are we going to get disintermediated? So if we actually start to let Facebook's or we let Google's now and Microsoft's Cortana or Alexa's Echo start to build the relationship with the customer and they become the neural network, they become the masters, and guess what? The airline gets disintermediated. Everyone gets disintermediated. So you no longer have the customer relationship. You have lost that customer relationship. They have the customer relationship. They have the customer data. So most of the companies that I spend time with, and as I said, I'm a global traveler, all come to us and actually say to us, how do we actually get access to technology that means that we don't get disintermediated? Yeah, well, sure, we're going to go and talk to all of those social media, big brand intelligent assistants, because you know what? They're all going to talk to each other. They all do stuff. I mean, there's many of you in the room that will have cool intelligent agents that will be doing stuff for people. But people will want to know who they're working for and where does my data go. And we've done a lot of research on this. And the brands will be very, very jealous about where is their data going, their customer data. So just about every brand that we work with wants to take our technology and white label it. We're cool with that. They'll want to keep the data. We're cool with that, but what we do say is that you need to share that data back with the customer, so you build a trust network, so you can actually have now this mutual trust and value. And then with MyWave, my own company, we're solving really complex issues with this. And I'll give you some examples further on around we actually are making people's lives easier doing that. So there isn't just going to be one answer. We are moving into this very, very rapidly. 3 years ago when I started MyWave, I think people thought I was a crazy lady. And many of you in this room are probably relatively young companies if you're working in the intelligent assistant space. What's been fascinating is how fast the market has risen up to meet us. It's happening at an unprecedented speed. The phone calls that you get from around the world by the day, not only from brands that are trying to figure out how to get match fit for this fourth industrial revolution, but from the sensor companies that want to now link you to the sensors. Hey, we've got the sensor layer. It almost feels like we're rebuilding the human body, but we're building it at massive scale. And this is what's so exciting. And this is the potential of the fourth industrial revolution. But equally, at the same time, man is at a crossroads, because we can use this for great good, or we can actually use this for bad things. I'll give you a good example where it's being used for bad things, and that's in China. So the Chinese are embracing this enormously. The challenge with China, though, is that they're using it. It's called social credit. It's almost like, well, you get stack ranked now amongst all your peers in China in terms of your access to things in China, whether it be a wife, money, political capability, housing, because you are now being you're being stacked ranked in a scorecard. And if you believe in the wrong religion, or you're not a member of the right party, or you haven't done the right things, then you've got a really low stacked ranking, and that's called digital discrimination. And so we have a real responsibility to make sure that in this world that we're creating, which will in fact remove so much friction and will free up so much benefit, that we actually don't start to unwittingly create what is called digital discrimination. And I would call that the low road. I think China is following the low road. Singapore actually is also, I used to live in Singapore for 4 years, they're also doing the same thing, monitoring everything. But they're a controlled island state, and they'll know everything about you. So our point of view is that we think it's better that we actually put people in control of these intelligent agents so that they can actually get the outcomes that they're looking for. And Control Shift, if you haven't heard of them, have done some really interesting research in the UK where they've called this the personal information economy. Because personal information and authentication and identity is, in fact, the critical element of the fourth industrial revolution. But you need to be able to give the data back to people so that they can actually have use and utility over it. And they just did some research with the British government where £16.5 billion of new value in sales and profits could be unlocked by doing this right in Britain alone. Imagine what can be done in America. Imagine what can be done in Europe. Imagine what can be done in other parts of the world. So there's more and more evidence coming around that there is enormous opportunity. There is also enormous pace for disruption. You can't do this slowly. So don't think that you're going to spend 3 years trying to prove this out. You need to get involved in proof of concepts, doing pilots, learning, failing fast, figuring out what works, and also working out, is your brand trusted enough for consumers to really want to actually share more about themselves with you in order to get a better outcome? Because some of you might not have the brand permission to do that, and we're doing quite a bit of work with brands there. So this has actually got tremendous opportunity, but equally there are hazards there as well. So this is where we see most firms, though. So if we look to the left-hand side, and many of you will have seen these charts.
This is the last painting I finished. This is actually a commission, so as soon as it dries, I'll be shipping this off. It's already fully paid for and everything, so it is no longer my painting. I'm just holding it for somebody. But this was fun, yo. I've been working on this for a couple weeks, and like I say, really, really cool commission to get. It's always cool when kids get a piece of their parents done. You know what I'm saying? That's a good parent, yo. When your child want to immortalize you in a piece of art, you know what I'm saying? You was a good parent. Yeah, so as soon as this dries, I'll put a nice coat of varnish on it. And then as soon as the varnish dries, I'll have to ship this off to Florida. I'm liking how this look though. This is gonna be a real nice piece. I'll show you guys the photograph I'm working from. So yeah. I think that's gonna turn out nice. So that's the underpainting is done. That's the first layer of paint. I'll let that dry for, well, technically her hair and her face, even the roses. A lot of it is dry, but I just did the dress yesterday and just painted that black just now. So like I said, I'll let that dry while I'm working on this piece, and then come back and start working on that piece. Oh man! So I'm gonna put this one back up on the canvas. Come on. This fucking easel. This shit is definitely too big for this room. Oh, it might have to be that much, bro. gonna be tight when it's done, yo. That big ass, pretty afro. Afro look crazy, son. Alright. Let's see.
Many times. We are, in my view, in the early adoption phase of the fourth industrial revolution. When I run around, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, the US, and here, we're talking to brands that I would say are at the forefront of thinking about that across almost every industry. And we're doing some really interesting projects with them, helping them think about where are they positioned. But the interesting thing is that the chasm is real. And the chasm is an interesting thing, because sometimes companies get stuck. So what ends up happening is, in the case of banks, well, yes, we'd love to move, and then they go to their IT departments to open up the APIs data of their customer data. It's like the IT department says, well, that will take 9 months to give you that API. Well, that's one chasm that you have to cross. Some people will be very threatened by this and say, well, I'll lose power. I'm not going to let that get through my committee discussions, or they'll try and slow it down. So many of you, I can see some smiles around the room and some nodding faces. This is a reality. But the good news is that a lot of people are jumping across the chasm. And if they're not jumping across the chasm, they're building bridges. Or they're figuring out how to stop being dinosaurs and start to fly like a bird. That can be in innovation units, that can actually be in pilots, that can actually be in reality. And I'll talk to you about a couple of examples of companies and what they're doing out there. Some of them are actually reshaping and building whole new divisions to build new business models. Because the size of the prize is huge. And the size of the prize for the guys that jump first will be higher. In the old days, it used to be safe. Remember fast follower? Well, you know what? Fast followers die in this world. You actually do need to jump. It might be scary not to jump. In fact, you might say, well, I'd rather just stay there and wait. But if you wait, you will actually have lost the opportunity, because there is a new digital chessboard forming, that those companies that, in fact, move first will be the ones that will start to build out what we call the new ecosystems. And I'll talk about these ecosystems in a minute, because they are real, and MIT are measuring them. And there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers in this world. So you have to figure out, where do you fit in the fourth industrial revolution, and which side of the chasm do you fit. But the good news is a lot of companies are moving across, and we're seeing this happening internationally. So this is not just a UK phenomenon, or a phenomenon down in Asia, or over across the ditch in the US. A lot of companies are innovating on this right now to create.
She says she's British, but she does live in Australia. So now she's been in Australia for a long time. So she does have this weird accent now. She starts out, she's like, I know my accent sounds kind of weird. It's hard to place. But I do go back to Britain every couple years, but I do live in Australia. Oh, I'm gonna wear my pants after they're all painted up, yo. I already got one pair. I just gotta wash them. I've been letting them dry for a couple days. As soon as they're nice and dry, throw them in the wash. Then I'm gonna rock the hell out of them shit somewhere.
This intelligent neural layer, and looking at how do they get end-to-end outcomes, moving past the old products and services into ones that generate more revenue and better margins, so that they stay relevant for the future. So this is part of this is part of the mindset shift, though, that all of you will need to go through if you haven't gone through it already. So what we have across the top are some of the trends that have driven the fourth industrial revolution. Some of them are technology trends. Obviously, we've got sensors, we've got robotics, we've got mobile devices, but it's not just about the mobile device now. It's the intelligent agents, it's natural language, it's speech, it's text-to-speech, etc. And then you've got the advent of the millennials, who actually are digital natives, and they are already very au fait with technology. The whole notion of experiences, that people will pay a premium for a great experience, so everyone chasing themselves in the race to the bottom of the price doesn't work anymore. If you're doing that, you've just turned yourself into a commodity. It's about doing more than that. So it's what is the 1 + 1 of, when you're doing the mortgage, it's the home. So you help me get the home, and the mortgage comes along with that.
Rock the hell out
If you are going to fly, it's actually knowing, well, why am I flying? And can you give me the end-to-end outcome and the experience, which might not just be the air ticket, but actually the destination on the other side as to whether you're doing this with your wife or whether you're going on business. There's lots of things that you can do to make a great experience, make people's lives easier, and generate loyalty. And intelligent agents give you the ability to do that at scale.
Like, what the fuck?
Because you can't give everyone a
You just got off work? Nah, nigga.
Using
Got these shits from Paris.
You have to use technology to create these hyper-personal experiences. You need to give the data back to the people because they're not going to share it with you if they don't trust you. So there's a whole bunch of things that have to be in place in order for you to master this world. The economy, we're in this new normal. There is not the growth anymore. The subprime mortgage crisis and the things that happened in the Lehman Brothers, we've not finished that fallout. But what it's signaling is that we're actually at the end of the old cycle. We're building a new one. And of course, governments are fed up. They're fed up with the energy industry not changing. Why is there £1.5 billion of savings that consumers in Britain could have if only the energy companies would enable consumers to move around a little bit more easily? Same thing with the banks. And why do you think the governments are being so hard on energy companies with regulators, with banks, with regulators? Because the friction and that asymmetry of information, where you made it so complicated you couldn't let the customer go. Guess what? The fourth industrial revolution, customers, they will be gone. So you better figure out how to work in that world. So this is the supply chain. Now I've spent with SAP 17 years automating that value chain across 27 industries, so I have every industry in my head. That's why I know how this all works. But what's interesting at the far end of that is that the consumer was always thought about as this dumb participant. That girl or guy, average age 18 to 24, she might have a propensity to buy, she lives in this area, let's do some big data analysis on her, and let's throw some stuff at her, and let's hope some of it sticks. How inefficient is that model? The fourth industrial revolution does not allow that model. There is no authentication, there's no hyper-personalization, there's no identity really. I'm just one of a herd of animals that you're going to market to en masse. Very wasteful. In the case of intelligent agents, like our one, we can actually be very precise and very targeted, but again, with permission and trust for the consumer. So the world that we're moving into is a world where you put the customer at the center, where you figure out what their jobs are to be done, and you bring all of this together, and you start to create end-to-end outcomes and an ecosystem. So if you're sitting over here as the manufacturer or the retailer, start to think about what those extra things are that you can do that create you to be a more trusted brand in the minds of the person. So in the case of a telco, the telcos are thinking about what in-home services could they be providing. In the case of retailers who sell tins of beans, they're looking at how do we get into banking, how do we get into things like energy, and how do we now stitch together, best deals and best approaches to help people always save money on all things. So they're busy figuring out how they can actually create better outcomes for people. So here is the crux of it, and I'd like you to give yourself a little bit of a test. Where do you fit on this chart? So what's interesting is Professor Peter Weil, and he and I have met, and they're doing some research across the world, across many brands, around who are the winners and who are the losers. And all this material is all freely available. I'm very happy to send you the papers if you'd like to drop me an email on this. But what's really interesting out of his research, and he's also studying some of the clients that we're working with as well, so because he wants to know who the winners and who the losers are in these new ecosystems. What's really interesting is along the bottom is where many, many companies are. A lot of companies say, well, we're moving up the line to be an omni-channel business. And when you start to look at the companies that are actually on the top right, that's actually where you want to be, an ecosystem provider. So it's quite interesting just to look at the statistics that if you are on the top right, you have 32% higher revenue and 22% higher profit margin if you move to the top right. I sit on the board of a bank, and we actually do this test ourselves as a board, with senior management, and we thought that we were on our way to being an omni-channel business, and we thought we would win the race by doing that. Guess what? The race actually isn't there anymore, it's moved to the right. So if you're just going to do an omni-channel, great. So you've given me one door to walk through. But that's still a product, it's still a service. You haven't really done anything to actually create more value for the consumer. You'll still be commoditized, you'll still be the same as everybody else. You have to think more than that. So a lot of the work that I end up doing is actually workshops where you actually start to help people start to not only think about who are their customers, but who are their partners. Most brands in the world have partners. These are partners that they already have out there. Where you're a bank, you might already be working with Visa or MasterCard with everyday daily deals. How do you now start to bring those daily deals? So when I'm saving for the holiday, or I'm saving for the home, or I'm saving for the car, well, why wouldn't the bank actually help me book the holiday, help me get the car, and help me actually find the home, and make that a frictionless experience where an intelligent agent is automatically filling in the forms for me and getting that job done? Why do you have to always forget the customer, even though they've banked with you for 20 years? So these are real live projects that we're involved in. So what's really interesting though is that if you are moving into the top right, and it's not that difficult, it really is not that difficult, it's a mindset shift. The challenge is that you don't have time forever. So remember I showed you the chasm. If you haven't jumped across the chasm first or second, there aren't that many spaces in the economy for an ecosystem in certain of these areas. There is only space for a few. And they're the ones that will become the masters of this universe. They are the ones that will actually be the closest to the customer, where you are the hub, and other brands will become a spoke in your hub. So the question is, you can be a spoke. That is actually a valid company strategy. You can be a spoke. But you're going to be then down in the bottom left where you're a supplier. The outcome of that is that you will then need to be much more efficient. You have to be much lower cost. You're going to have to be really super efficient to be a spoke in someone else's hub. But equally, if you're aspirational and brave enough as a brand, you can in fact be a hub yourself. And what I find is amazing is how many fantastic hubs there potentially are out there. So when we go and talk to the brands, we actually help them figure out, are you a hub or are you a spoke? If you're a spoke today, how do you get to be a hub? Who are those partners? Who are your customers today? What are their jobs to be done? And, we're able to help them get there in 6 to 9 months. We can actually help them move from the old world to the new world. This is not difficult, but it is a mindset shift. And so most of what my company, MyWave, is about is actually not just the technology, it's actually helping your mindset shift and being fast enough on all the prototyping so you can then take this up to the board and say, hey, actually, this is we've just tested this with consumers, and this is the new way that we can in fact move to the top right. And there's so much data now that boards can see now of where it's already been proven. So that kind of brings it to sort of kind of what we're up. So we have this brain, we have an intelligent agent called Frank, but we're not just servicing him in an omni-channel. We're not just taking him out to the net to tell me what the weather's like in Minneapolis, or go and tell me where the nearest good pizza restaurant is. We're doing some more complicated things than that. We're actually turning Frank into the consumer. Help me get the best power plan and best power price, and that's already live overseas, and it's actually being rolled out into the UK shortly, where that £1.5 billion of value that has not been unlocked in the UK is coming to the UK, and it's coming through a major brand that is in everyone's homes. And so what that means is that you've got millions and millions of British consumers now using an intelligent agent in a trust network where their power bill is ingested, they have control of the data, and that intelligent agent automatically switches them to best plan, best price, automatically all the time. And it has some benefits for the energy industry that I'll talk to you about in a moment, and it also has benefits for the consumer. But we're doing this with banking, we're doing this in a whole bunch of different industries. So you can come to our stand. I'm not going to go and spend time shamelessly pushing MyWave and Frank today, so you can go and see Amy and Wally at the booth and see what he's up to, because everything on our website is what he's doing at the moment. But effectively, it's an intelligent agent where you're in control of the data, but you're in control, the brand, with the consumer, It's not being sucked up into some, Facebook or some other big brand. But equally, we can share data should the consumer wish to and should you wish to. So again, this becomes you're in control of these experiences together with the consumer. And you can see some examples there, whether it's buying a car, getting healthier, getting a home, etc. But what we end up doing, though, is we actually end up with brands helping them build ecosystems. And it's really, really interesting. We've got bean sellers who sell tons of beans that are just a commodity today. There's too much competition, and we're helping them now also connect the dots for their customers in retail, banking, because they can bring banking services in, and energy. We've got another company that we just spoke to yesterday here in the UK that does a lot of really interesting things around credit and credit scores. Imagine a world now where you flip the model and you actually put the credit score in the hands of the consumer, and they can lead and negotiate the mortgage interest loan with an auto-filled form. Here's my credit score. I'm a really good credit rating. Who wants my business? So these are the things that Frank does. Frank actually flips the model and enables the smart companies out there to figure out how to become masters of ecosystems and flip that model and turn that into a reality. And we've got lots of examples. Travel is another one where you just say to Frank, book me that flight, and Frank knows all your preferences, and he'll know what what kind of seat you like. He'll know the kind of hotels you like. You can tell Frank what the value is of the ticket that you want to spend on. So you've got real-time market data, because there's two sides to Frank. There's a dashboard that goes to the brand, so you've got real-time market data with consumers, and there's also something in it for the consumer as well. So this is where we're pretty unique as we fly around the world, helping companies move across. Clearly, in all of this, is that personalisation and identity is really important. So you've really got to know who you're talking to. My biggest worry about chatbots out there is I think that there's going to be a massive negative reaction to the chatbots that I'm seeing starting to come up, and I'll tell you why. First of all, you don't know who the chatbot's working for. We know that there's quite a bit of fraud. There's going to be fraudulent use of these chatbots. You think you're talking to a human. That chatbot may in fact be driven by somebody that's sitting in Nigeria, could be driven by somebody sitting in the Ukraine, that actually is trying to get information from you to go and steal something. So verification, authentication, and identity is absolutely critical in all of this. Our point of view on that is that that then just becomes almost like the invisible oil. So there are I've got too many pins, I've got too many passwords. In fact, it's getting to a point where I actually have to write them down because I can't remember them anymore. It could be a sign of my age, but I think I've just got too many things going on in too many different parts of the world. And it shouldn't have to be that hard. So when your intelligent agent then is able to actually authenticate who's coming to you and who you are talking to, and this is again, where you can start to use, credit scoring companies can actually suddenly start to become agencies to know customers. So suddenly your credit score actually turns into your identity as well, and can turn into authentication. There's so many things that you can do to remove and ease the friction that you have in everyday modern banking experiences. Now, I sit on the board of a bank, and I am of an opinion that banks have almost got arterial sclerosis, because they are so bound in the core banking systems. They can't release the APIs fast enough, unless you're an atom bank and you're born digital first, to be able to work on some of these things. So we've done some amazing projects with banks, but oh my God, they're the slowest guys to work with. A couple will cross the chasm, but a lot of them are going to fall on the other side. And that's why there's so much M&A activity in banks. And even some of the challenger banks are going to find it hard, because the mindset's just not there. So we all know what identity is going to be. I think one of the biggest things that distresses me the most is the genome sequencing is amazing. Think about personalized medicine. There is nothing more unique to every single one of us in this room than our genome. Because why? We're all unique. The old industrial revolution of the first and the second and the third treats us like herds of animals. They do not see how unique we are. Our genome, we are unique. But what's worse is that all the genome sequencing that's being done right now is your data. When you have your genome data, it's being sold. You don't know where it's going. You don't know how it's being used. This is where the negative side of that is that if you were predisposed to an illness, imagine that now weighing on your healthcare insurance or your life insurance. This is where again you really do need to be in control of your data. And if someone already has a genome and that horse has actually left the stable, how can I ever use my genome to verify who I am, because I don't even know where my genome went to? So find that out. You know, it's being solved, supposedly for scientific purposes, for research. What kind of research? Where? Who's using it? So that's something that's so, you know, and I think the reason why I'm raising it is that a lot of people don't even know that. So if you look at all of these things, it can be voice, fingerprint, retina. How many of you have seen the movie The Night Manager? Yeah, it's cool. Hey, I would say retina display, transferring my money, and you know, billions is transferring around the world. These are the things that we absolutely will have.
And if y'all got kids, man, or if you are a kid, like some of y'all motherfuckers in here, y'all got to think about the next 40, 50 years, yo. The world is gonna be different, yo. Seriously. These motherfuckers are talking about gene editing, cybernetic components, and artificial general intelligence, like in the next 50 years. Elon Musk said maybe in the next 40 years, new cars coming out the factory won't have steering wheels. If you look at that game, Detroit Become Human, they have a scene in the game where a group of the androids are trying to escape the city from persecution, and they're in a vehicle that's autonomous, and you can look at the dashboard and there is no steering wheel, and that shit is like right around the corner, yo. And the hardest thing that's going to be upon us in the next 15 to 20 years is the physical change in the job market. But like, I work in a factory, bro. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a laborer, but I monitor a machine. I'm a machine operator. You know what I'm saying? I watch the machine. But like, sooner or later, man, there are going to be so many redundancies in the system, so many more automated parts and closed circuit AI algorithms to run this shit. They're not gonna fucking need me. You know what I'm saying? And then even the guys who still do like the grunt work, like, they're not gonna need those guys either. If you look at these new robots that Amazon has incorporated into their warehouses and shit, where you used to have a bunch of guys riding around on forklifts or pushing or pulling fucking pallet jacks to move shit from shipping to receiving, from receiving and all that shit. Like, that shit is automated now. They got fucking robots that pick up shit, take it here, take it there, scan it, like, you know what I'm saying? But that shit is this shit is about to change, yo. And I'm just trying to get my kids prepared for this shit, because the job market is going to be completely different. The skills that you're going to need are going to be completely different. You know what I'm saying? You got a gold trophy on Detroit. I thought about getting it. I played the demo, and the demo was fun as hell. And the day it came out, I have this thing now where I used to like pre-order all the games, dude. I've been gaming forever. You know what I'm saying? I just wanted every game. But now, like, I don't know, like in the past 6-7 years, a lot of games have been trash to me, and I don't finish them. You know what I'm saying? I just don't. It's like, what the fuck? And I don't ever finish the game. So lately, I just like wait till the game come out and watch somebody stream that shit. You know what I'm saying? Go on PlayStation Live and watch a live game stream for the new games. And so I sat there and I watched somebody play Detroit Become Human, I watched a lot of gameplay from it, and it's cool to watch that shit. But now since I don't watch so much of it, and I know so much of the storyline, it's like I don't want to play it now. 8 Mile. What? You work at that plant in 8 Mile. Word?
Jobs and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. My name is Sadia Zahidi. I manage the forum's work on education, gender, and employment. Welcome. Welcome also to our two speakers today. Erik Brynjolfsson is director of the MIT Initiative on the Digital Economy at MIT Sloan School of Management and co-author of The Second Machine Age. And Suzanne Fortier is Principal and Vice Chancellor of McGill University in Canada. Welcome to both of you. This is a topic that has generated a lot of debate over the last year, and certainly here at Davos. And I think we're all keen to understand where things might be heading, and also keen to understand how we should react to it, how we should adapt, what we should be doing to ensure that we can manage this transition that's underway. There's a lot of very different views on what the impact of technology will be on jobs, and of course how that will interact with so many other trends that are underway, whether that's aging or migration or climate change, some of these other big changes that are happening in the world. Some of the data is quite negative, so there are predictions that up to 47% of jobs may be automated away. Others are more nuanced. There are predictions that say it's probably only about 9%, but either way, we are in the midst of a transition. Some of the World Economic Forum's own work has found that regardless of whether the jobs disappear or not, even those that are here to stay, at least 30% of the core skills that are required for them, on average, will be completely different in just 3 years' time by 2020. So the pace of change has certainly accelerated, even for jobs that remain. So we're going to try to find out today where the truth lies, whether we know what some of the forecasts really mean. And to kick us off, Erik, give us the tour of both the good news and the bad news, and where you think things will head in the next 3 to 5 years, and then into the long future.
Sure. Sadia, well, as you said, there's been a real sea change in the public discussion, especially here in Davos and in the World Economic Forum, about how we're thinking about this. 2 or 3 years ago, we were relatively lonely voices when we started talking about self-driving cars. People thought we were a little wacky and it was sort of science fiction-y. But now, of course, we see them increasingly driving around the streets in Boston, Singapore, Pittsburgh, elsewhere. And the machine learning revolution has really kicked in. There was hype in previous waves, but now machines really are beginning to able to see better than humans can, read street signs, diagnose cancer from medical images, understand speech almost as well. Really all 5 senses are beginning to have systems that are very good at it, and do more and more analytical reasoning. And it's because of a revolution in machine learning, especially this category of deep learning and deep neural nets, where the machines absorb lots and lots of data and then on their own make inferences and start understanding how to process that and that is allowing them to affect many, many more kinds of jobs. Mostly, I think this is good news. You asked for the good news. I think it's having been ways of helping our healthcare and really creating literally billions and billions of dollars of demonstrable value in many, many businesses. And I think it'll be trillions of dollars going forward, one of the biggest revolutions in human history. But it's not all good news. And the other reason people are talking about it is not because of these wondrous technological developments, but it's because of the political backlash that we've seen, because many people are not participating in this revolution. The reality is that there's no economic law that says that everyone's going to benefit from a technological advance. It's possible for some people, even a majority of people, to be left behind. For most of history, that's not what happened, but in the past revolution, especially the past 10, 20 years, there have been so many people left behind. The shocking statistics are that the median income, the person at the 50th percentile in the United States and other countries, is lower now than it was 15 years ago. And furthermore, over 80%, according to a recent McKinsey study, over 80% of households have not seen any real income gains. And so you can understand why they feel upset, they feel disillusioned, they feel angry. And some of the election results show that they want to change. They don't feel the system is working for them. Now, there's a lot of other forces at work there. I don't want to pin that all on the fourth industrial revolution or the second machine age. But my own view is the core of it is that there's a tectonic change happening in the underlying technology of our economy, and that's playing out in terms of the economics, the kinds of jobs that can be affected. I actually think it's less a matter of the employment levels, despite some of those numbers that you mentioned, and it shows up more in wages and stagnating compensation. That's the nature of actually a well-functioning economic system. When demand falls for any input, whether it's horses or humans, you tend to see lower prices first or lower wages. But people aren't happy when they see that. And ultimately, I'm sure we'll get into this in discussion, we're going to have to rethink some of our educational policies and some of our other policies so we do have shared prosperity.
Thank you, Eric. Suzanne, let's stick with the second for with the forecast. What do you think will happen in the next 5 years in particular, and then out into the longer future?
Well, I think our radars are really giving us the right signal. We're going to see quite a large number of jobs disappearing or changing significantly. Obviously, a lower skills job initially. But with the increased capacity of sensorial capacity of many of the algorithms right now, we're going to see even a higher skill job in the future disappearing. I must say, I think our radars have been giving us the right signals, at least for the short term. And maybe what is most surprising is that we haven't acted as rapidly as we should have, because we certainly could see it coming. I had the opportunity last summer to visit a car plant, the BMW, and it's impressive to see all the robotics. And of course, you know, all the jobs have changed there in the car industry. So we knew that it was coming. I think we're fairly good at predicting 3, 4, 5 years ahead. It's the long term that is really the tough one for me.
Tell us a little bit about the long term.
Well, I think, you know, I'm the head of a university. We have students arriving at our university. They'll graduate in 4 years for their first degree. So 5 years is short term for me. What I need to think about is what is the learning experience they must have to be prepared for the world ahead, a world that we cannot even predict yet. So it's not a matter for us to have students who are job ready. They have to be future ready. And we need to think about that, because it is going to be part of their lives.
So if you were to think about a change that you would want to make, looking out into the future at your university, or what you would broadly recommend to institutions of higher education, what would that be?
Well, what I think we're doing, and what many universities are doing, is including different modes of learning, learning experience. So, and it is important to have some modes that are really in deep learning for our students, deep reflection, modes that nurture their creativity, entrepreneurial innovation. but it is also important, and our students demand that today, that they have the ability to use right from day one what they're learning. And that is often what triggers their own creativity and innovation. So it is a matter of integrating different modes of learning and putting them also in that digital world of the future, which is now in our campuses, in our laboratories. The fourth industrial revolution is not tomorrow. It is in the laboratories of our university. We can show students what it looks like.
Okay, so that's universities. Not everyone goes to university. And of course, Eric, you already mentioned lifelong learning. So how do we need to put in place broader reforms to education systems, and who needs to do it?
Yeah, I think we certainly need greater investment in education, but more fundamentally, we need to reinvent how education is done. The sad reality is much of our education today, and I speak as an educator myself, is really geared towards an industrial economy. We have people sit in rows of desks quietly and say, please follow the instructions, don't get out of sync with everyone else, memorize these facts. But let's face it, following instructions, memorizing facts, that's what machines do well. What humans have a comparative advantage in is in a couple of areas. Let me highlight them. One is in creativity and thinking outside of the box, large-scale problem solving. And the second is in interpersonal relations, emotional intelligence, connecting with other people. Right now, our universities don't do much to foster those. I think they are teachable skills, teamwork. We certainly try to teach creativity and entrepreneurship at MIT. We also have something called Charm School. I don't know how well it works to try to teach some of the interpersonal skills. We need it, we certainly do. So I think that there's going to have to be a reinvention. And actually, I think that machine learning and artificial intelligence can help with this. We can develop skills maps of the kinds of skills that are in the economy today, the kinds that are being demanded by employers and we think will be demanded going forward, and a mapping from one to the other so that we can do that. And machine learning can help speed that up. I'm talking to some of the people like Andrew Wang and Sebastian Thrun that have developed the leading courses in these areas or programs in these areas, and they think we can get a 5x or 10x improvement in shifting the skill mix in the economy.
So who is doing some of these changes? And this is to both of you. Yeah. Who is putting in place these changes, and how do they need to be collaborating with each other? Suzanne, do you want to start?
Yes, I will say on our university campus, and I think in many university campuses, the students are doing these changes. They are themselves reinventing the way that they have a learning experience on our campuses. They are taking an active role in their own learning. I see students all the time launching all sorts of initiatives in social innovation, for example, in participating in the life of the community, locally and globally. I see them arranging their curriculum so that they can have different types of activities. And so they are themselves doing it, and I think inspiring us, I must say, to think about the changes that we must bring to our learning environment. And one thing I would add, and I see that almost all students I see, they are seeking mentorship. They want to see people, they're bright enough to know that they've got a lot to learn. And so they're seeking people from other generations to be mentors. They integrate themselves into networks of diverse people. It's coming from them. I'm constantly amazed about how, in a way, aware they are of what it is they need for the future.
So that's great. That gives us a lot of hope for the future in the next generation. But there are 3 billion plus people that are already part of the world's workforce. So Eric, could you talk a little bit about what type of adult training and skilling systems need to be put in place? And again, who needs to do it?
Sure. And I agree very much with Suzanne that you see this demand pull from the students, but there's two other groups that are really falling dramatically short, and those are governments and companies. There's recently a study by the National Bureau of Economic Research that showed that a 10% increase in education investment led to more than a 10% increase in the lifelong wages of people, and there's uplift was especially high at the low end of the scale. So there's a huge return on investment from this, but unfortunately governments aren't making the kinds of investment, they aren't doing the reinvention, and businesses, a lot of them frankly are free riding. They figure, well, if we invest in education and training our workforce, then that employee will leave and go elsewhere. But I want to ask them the question, you know what's even worse than that? What if you don't invest in them and then they end up staying? then you have a mismatched workforce. So you've got to make the investments, and we need to have a way of coordinating partnerships for doing this. As you mentioned, there are billions of people around the globe that potentially can get access to these systems. And the way I think we're going to do it is with the digital technologies. Almost everyone has a mobile phone now. I was just hearing from one of the other sessions here in Davos that even 70% of the refugees, they have mobile phones. So this can be a device for reaching out to people, not just with static one-way lectures that people listen to, although those can be valuable, but with a true coaching and dialogue and interaction. And as people develop curricula that are based on this new kind of platform, we can at very low marginal cost reach a much larger set of the world's population.
That's great. So we talked a bit about skilling, about education. What about some of the other policy changes that need to be put in place? Do we need to be planning for a future where people will have less work? And how will we then ensure that everybody is able to fulfill their potential, is able to live?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to plan for a future where people will live very long lives. We're talking now about living to 100-year-old. A future where study, work, leisure will be blended. It will be a blended environment of those three types of activities. We have to plan for a future where we provide people with what they need, or people are able to provide themselves what they will need for this long life that will be one that will challenge them in some ways to lead a productive, a contributing life for the very long term. So we need to think about not only the changes in jobs, but longevity as well, which is, I think, coming. So there's a big challenge in front of us, I think. But in many ways also, I think this is a very optimistic view of our future. But of course, and I think Erica has talked about that quite a bit, what I'm describing here is not what we see now or the possibilities that people might see around the world. And you know, at the forum we are hearing that we need to have a radar and a compass. So we have the radar, I think radar. We know some of these things. We know that we have this opportunity to have very long lives with the technologies and the medical advances. But it's not distributed evenly. So will our compass tell us that one way to really fill your life with great things, great accomplishments, is to work in spreading all of these positive positive view of what we see here more around the world.
Eric?
Yeah, let me build on what Suzanne was saying and make a distinction between the long term and the short term, and very much in sync with what she was saying. In the long run, I think we have really the best thing that humanity ever hoped for, which is a world with vastly more wealth, vastly less work. And we read about it in science fiction as machines are able to take on more and more of our tasks, and we will eventually get to that kind of society. But I think it's a mistake to focus too much on that far future that we read about in science fiction, because the problem we have today is quite different. Right now, there is so much work that needs to be done. We have no shortage of problems in healthcare, in education, in cleaning the environment. And the fact is that most of those tasks require human labor right now. Machines are not good enough to handle so many of those different tasks. And it would be a mistake to focus too much on the distant future. I've come up with a way of phrasing this. I call it technological presbyopia. Presbyopia is that when you can see far away but you can't see close. I see some people here with glasses like I do, and we need glasses because we can no longer see what's up close. I think we're making the same thing with mistake with technology. We see this vision in the future of a world without work, and people are seduced by it. But the reality is right now we have so much work that needs to be done, and let's focus on solving the world's real problems today that cannot all be done by machines. They're generally going to require a human-machine partnership to solve things that we've never been able to take on before. And if we do that, I think we're going to have a much smoother path to that eventual world of increased leisure.
One of our participants yesterday was saying that we've been focusing so much on the word disruption, and we need to start looking at it instead as responsible disruption and to manage this process that is underway. So we've had a conversation that's been fairly focused on the advanced economies. What do things look like in the rest of the world? What do you think some of the changes will be in emerging markets in the developing world?
Sure. Why don't I touch on that? And we heard from Premier Xi Jinping. Was it yesterday, the day before? And I thought his comments were very, very thoughtful. But having spent some time visiting the factories in China there, I came away feeling like, if anything, many of those developing countries are even more in the bullseye of this revolution than the advanced countries. And the reason is you go to those factories, there's a lot of people still doing a lot of routine, repetitive kinds of work, and they do it at lower wages than they do in Switzerland or Germany or Canada. And so they're very competitive. But the fact is that no matter how low the wages are, they're not going to be able to compete with the next generation of robots. So that workforce is going to have to be transformed just like it is in the advanced countries. But they start, on average, with less educated, fewer people in the service sector, fewer people in the education and R&D sectors. So they have an even bigger transformation ahead of them. And I think it's going to hit them really hard. They've been very successful the past couple of decades competing against humans in the advanced world and creating a lot of wealth for themselves and for the world in general. But going forward, the technological revolution is going to affect the entire globe. If we handle it right, it will create broadly shared wealth. But the disruption that you referred to, I hope it will be responsible disruption, is going to hit globally.
So there's some people who predict that we're going to go towards seeing the rise of digital sweatshops, and there are others who talk about how some of the changes that are underway are going to lead to a leapfrogging opportunity for a lot of developing countries, again, if handled right. Where do you think things are heading at the moment? Who's doing it well?
So I see both those things happening going forward. And I think the last part of your question was really the key, depending on how you handle it, if you handle it well. And one of the things that in a panel like this, the temptation is to make predictions. And the thing that I keep reminding myself, and I want to remind all of you, is that technology is a tool. It's a tool that we can use to change the world. It's a more powerful tool than any tool we've had before, which means we actually have more influence over the future. And we can use those same tools to create a very good society or a very bad society. Neither of them is inevitable. So I disagree with the optimists. I disagree with the pessimists, because both of them have this implicit assumption that something's going to happen to us. And the real reality is that we get to choose and decide. So there will be countries and societies and companies that create digital sweatshops. There are others that create a vastly broader shared prosperity. And we've seen countries in the past take both of those paths. And I would encourage everyone in this room and everyone who's watching to think about how they can take an active role in shaping the future rather than a passive role in guessing what it's going to be.
Thanks, Eric. Suzanne, let me get back to an earlier point that you made, which is really the human aspect of this. And so where should the focus of education systems be? Is it on we hear a lot about STEM education, ICT education. If the world is moving into a more technologically driven world, then that's what we should be preparing for. And there are others who say it's the creativity, it's the human aspect. Where do you think the balance should lie?
I think the challenge for us is to return to the Renaissance education, and particularly if generations of students now on our campuses are going to live a long life. I think they would benefit most from a Renaissance type of education. So of course, STEM, I think you cannot easily navigate this world if you have no understanding of science, technology, mathematics. It's an essential component. But I don't think it's sufficient. I don't think a person who's limited to very good education in these areas will necessarily be having a happy and productive life. I think that they need to also be exposed and learn how to enjoy all of the arts, humanities, and enjoy that learning. I think we need to think of a broader education rather than a narrower one. And that is actually, I think, the challenge, because it is the challenge between an education that gets you job ready and an education that gets you future ready. And that's the big challenge.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think there was a great session yesterday where Alan Blue, the co-founder of LinkedIn, made exactly this point, that there's this distinction between the harder skills and the softer skills. There's a temptation to get focused too much just on the hard skills, which are certainly essential, and coming from MIT, I see the value of them. But in the long run, being able to learn, being able to connect with other people, those are the things that carry over for long-term value creation.
We have time for a couple of brief questions from the audience. Sir.
Thank you very much. Frans Muller, working for Ahold Delhaize, a supermarket company with 350,000 people. So this topic is relevant for us, being a rather traditional industry. What I'm a little bit worried about, although agreeing a lot what has been said, is when is the reality check coming in between education and work? And I think we do this too late. University graduates will find their way because smart people. But the majority of the people we work with are less educated, and I think there's an obligation for the private sector to do this reality check. Did we train now properly for demand? So the heat map of what demand will be, I think, is very helpful. So then you know what to focus on. And I think the public and private sector have an obligation to check the reality as from elementary school. Already much earlier if we are now training for the future or training for jobs. And if you see the number of people, youth graduates who are without a job, youth unemployment is a disastrous development, very demotivating for both parents and the youth themselves. So I would plead for a much earlier reality check, creating experience, creating jobs. In retail, as from 15 years, it's easy. Other industry, a little bit more difficult. But I think we have to make that reality much faster and earlier.
Thank you. That's a helpful comment. Yes. Is there anybody who has a question?
Birgit Mitnacht from Paris. I have a very practical question. If you would have teenage kids, what kind of curriculum, what kind of education would you advise to them to get them future ready and job ready? Because we are being asked this question quite often, and actually I don't have the right answer, but now I have experts here, and thank you.
It's a great question, a really important one. I'm glad you asked. Let me touch on three categories in particular that are very important. And the general principle is you want to do things that machines don't do well. Don't want to be competing with machines, you want to complement them. So the first area, I think I touched on these a little bit. One is creativity and large problem solving. These are teachable skills. And the sad thing is that if anything, schools have been almost designed to stamp it out, to discourage creativity. You know, if you had a teenager now, you once had a 3-year-old, and you probably watched them play with blocks, they can't resist building things. It's something in humans, we love to create things. And we need to allow that to flourish rather than discourage it. Secondly, and this is one that can affect a lot more people, is interpersonal skills. So many of the people at the supermarket or elsewhere, the checkout register, that's going to be increasingly automated. But connecting with other people, that is something that's going to be lasting for a long time. Teamwork, leadership, coaching people, motivating people. It doesn't work to have a robot give you a pep talk and try to motivate you. That something has to be a personal connection. And there are many people that may not have advanced degrees, but they have a lot of emotional intelligence, and we can bring that out as well. And then the third thing I would say is that we are increasingly in a superstar economy, and increasingly it's a winner-take-all economy, and the people who win those are the ones who are the very, very best in something. But the good thing is that there are many, many categories that you can be the best in. So that means I would double down on the old advice we always give to our kids, which is follow your passion. The reason you want to do that is because you want to put in those extra hours of where you really love something, and you do it not because you have to do it, but because you enjoy doing it. And that's what you need to get to that really world-class level. And today, you can reach not just a few hundred or a few thousand people, you could potentially reach a billion people. And it may be a very narrow particular skill, but if you are a superstar in it, you will find an audience.
Thank you. Suzanne, your view on that question?
Yes, I will use 3 letters, RD and D. Anything that requires RD and D. Anything that a person likes that requires a bit of research, digging deeper into the knowledge in something that you enjoy is a great thing. Of course, development. So develop your ability to say, okay, now that I found this great idea, how could I possibly be developed? How could we possibly implement it? And design, which is how can we do this in a way that in a way that people, with a people focus attitude. So it's something that we do in many, many fields. It could be political studies. It could be in chemistry. It could be in any field, actually. Music. But those 3 types of activities, I think, are the ones that will probably not be easily replaceable by computers, by algorithms, and so on. That will require human participation. And so, whatever you like, whatever draws you, but focus on making sure that these elements are part of your education.
That's great. Thank you. We will have only about a minute left, and you asked a great question on what we should be telling kids. So let me turn this back to the people that are here today. The theme of this meeting is responsible and responsive leadership. Leave us with your final thoughts in a sentence each, perhaps, as to what that looks like to ensure that we manage this transition in labor markets.
Sure. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for wealth creation, but what we've been missing, and the mistake we've been making, is it hasn't been inclusive, and it needs to be. So I would have a big push for inclusive innovation. At MIT, we've launched something we call the Inclusive Innovation Challenge, where we are challenging companies not just to build the next generation of amazing technologies, but to build business models and ways of incorporating people into the production process that will be widely shared prosperity, value. I think if we make a conscious effort to direct the future in this direction towards inclusive innovation, we can have a much better society. It's a totally achievable goal. There's no one single path for the technology. It's going to depend on our choices. So my bywords would be inclusive innovation.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Well, I'm not too far from that either. I think that is the important thing, really. But inclusive innovation at a planet scale. It's easy, I think, when we live in the cities that we both live, to think of inclusive innovation and see how we can make that happen. It's a big, big, big challenge for our world to see that happening at the level of the planet.
Okay, so globally inclusive innovation.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Eric Ligneufson, Suzanne Fortier, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
listen to some Joe Rogan?
I gotta ask you this one thing before.
Sure.
Is because I read this and I was like, what?
Here we go.
You saw someone shapeshift?
Oh, God.
Is it? Is that real, or were you fucking with people?
No, it's true.
Really?
Yeah, it's true.
Because when you told me that you enjoy Kaufman-like moments, I was like, okay.
No, it's true. I would tell you off grid, but I won't say it publicly.
Really?
The only way I'd say it publicly is if I write it in. I've been writing this book for years, and it's in the book.
Really?
So I'd tell you off grid, but I can't. Look, I know Alex Jones sat in this seat, you know, right? I know you've been on InfoWars. I've been on, you know, there's a
Have you been on InfoWars
Oh, yeah,
too?
I think 3 or 4 times, yeah.
What have you been on InfoWars for?
Mostly talking about free speech.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing that is critical in alternative media, is to fight. That's a frontline issue for me.
Yeah.
This demonetizing of people's videos and trying to censor messages, and even how the Twitter exec just recently admitted in front of Congress how they were suppressing negative Hillary hashtags and stuff.
Yes.
I mean, that's crazy to me.
Yes. I think so too.
That, like, you got somebody openly saying, yeah, we were, you know, if we're going to sit here and go on and on about Russian collusion, I mean, is that not an in-kind donation?
Well, you're manipulating people's ability to freely exchange ideas.
So as an artist who's been in the public sphere almost 30 years, and I've seen people manipulate my image and turn me into a meme and all this stuff, I'm very sensitive to if somebody wants to deny me the right to either reply or get my message out.
Right.
As long as we have that ability, I trust our democracy. We need people like you and me and anybody else. Like, great. I think our democracy is better for it. And that includes people who say things that I don't approve of or like.
We don't live in a democracy, though.
I agree as well. I think it's very important that if people do say those things that you don't approve of or like, that other people express why they don't approve of those things or like them. And the only way that happens is if you hear the initial thought. You have to hear the one thing that you don't like in order for someone to say something that resonates. You go, yes, that's why we disagree with that initial thought.
Okay, so I'll use an example. If we generally agree that an idea is so abhorrent or so racist or so bigoted, then what are we afraid of? Because the argument should be that the collective agrees that that is an inappropriate thing to do and express, and then socially we can sort of correct course, and it gives the other person on the other side the opportunity to course correct too.
Yes.
Like, in essence, if you're so sure of an idea being true, what are you afraid of?
Right.
Why can that idea not withstand the dirtiest, most scurrilous thing that can be thrown at it?
Yeah, it's one of the more uncomfortable things about people on the left today is this newly embraced idea that you should be able to suppress ideas you don't agree with.
That's terrifying.
It is terrifying.
That's terrifying.
I agree.
I mean,
let's wrap this up so I can hear your shapeshifter story. I want to hear that, man.
Let's put it this way: it's pretty wild.
I believe you.
Thank you.
I just wish you could tell other people.
I will someday.
You'll put it in a book.
Yeah.
So please tell people how they can see you, the name of your new album, where they can get it.
I have an album out, solo acoustic, OG Lala, produced by Rick Rubin. It just came out about a month ago. I'm just finishing up my tour dates in LA, so that's pretty much done. I'm going to go record another acoustic album, and then hopefully next year there'll be a Pumpkins tour.
Awesome. That'd be beautiful.
Our fingers are crossed.
Well, thank you, Billy. I really appreciate you.
I love being
here.
here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Billy Corgan, from the lead singer from Smashing Pumpkins, said he seen somebody shapeshift.
So you're obsessed with UFOs, right? Is that safe to say?
It's safe to say, but it's not so much just the UFO itself. I mean, I don't call them that anymore. We call these advanced aerial threats. They're different. But
threats?
You honed in on a word we weren't supposed to really get into here in the first part of the show.
Did you have a plan?
I have a very long plan, detailed plan. We're going to start with my body. We're just going to talk about my body for a lot. And
okay, what do you want to talk about when it comes to your body?
Well, my body is interesting. It's unique.
Okay.
And it changes shape. And what I've noticed is it's just changing.
Yeah, it's getting larger,
getting wider,
depending upon what you put in it.
You're all. Can I cuss?
Yeah, for sure. We're on the internet.
You're so fucking fit. You shook my hand. I think it'd break my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just don't be strong.
I didn't mean to.
Don't be so handsome.
Just shaking
strong.
your hand. That was a handshake.
I know. Well, it's one of those power moves. You ever see when Trump shakes people's hands and he pulls them in? And he's like,
yeah, he does do weird shit.
He does weird shit like that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to do that. Just I'd shake your hand like a man.
Well, I took it as like, know your place, motherfucker.
Oh,
this is my show.
Didn't think that.
No, I'm just joking.
Interesting. So, when did you get obsessed with this aerial threat thing? And why do you call them threats?
We'll get into that, I guess.
Okay.
I got into it when I was in junior high. But for some weird reason, I had like some time off, and I went to the school library in like 7th grade, and I was like, damn, I'm gonna read some boring shit. What am I gonna read? And I saw this one book, and it had a picture of the Loch Ness Monster in like a UFO. I'm all, that looks cool. And I read that, and I was like, holy cow, these are like real. It wasn't all science fiction. I mean, the way the book was laid out, I was like, these are like real events. I'm all, there's no way, really. And then when the band started doing its thing in the back of the van, there were no like smartphones, so we were buying books, and I would just lay there. We'd have like 20-hour drives, and so I started buying books on the UFO phenomenon. And once you do that, it's a black hole. You're done.
Yeah, it's definitely a rabbit hole. You get sucked into it. At my house, I have a framed poster that's the cover of the Roswell Daily News.
Yeah.
That shows the day after the Roswell crash, where it says that the Air Force came and recovered the wreckage, and the whole deal. I've been obsessed with this shit since I was a little kid.
Yeah, I think that's by design. I think that this generation was meant to have this stuff come out. But I can't prove that. That's just my feeling.
What makes you feel that?
Because of exactly what you said. There's a lot of people. I don't believe that some of the events happened on accident. I think that there's been a lot of events that are on purpose. Some have been for show. Some have been for. There's a variety of reasons, but I think a lot of it is a control system that's really pushing humanity in a very specific direction. And
so like they've got a time frame where they've had these events take place. Is that what you think?
Yeah, and they also time travel, which is different than what people think in like a movie where they sit in a machine and you're in the 1930s and you got to go save humanity. When you use the technology, there's a time difference between what they're doing inside of an artificially created bubble of gravity of sorts, and then what's on the outside. So if you're on the inside of one of those machines, everything would be skewed more black and white. There would be like a red shift, and everybody would look frozen. So you literally could fly around and grab a Coke out of someone's hand and put it in someone else's hand. It's really...
Where are you getting this from?
Well, take a wild guess. Look at the people I'm surrounded by,
So the people you're surrounded by are telling you this? Is that what it is?
Well, I don't want to get into that, but the people I'm surrounded with and myself, are very close to this stuff. But the physics, the physicist that's a co-founder of my company, To the Star, he's a Nobel nominee. He wrote the book on plasma physics.
What's his name?
Hal Puthoff, Dr. Hal Puthoff. And he created remote viewing. Do you know what remote viewing is?
Yeah.
He's the creator of the CIA psychic spy program, but he also has done like really exotic, advanced, forefront propulsion work for the past decades and decades. Actually, I mean, he's deep into like quantum this and that. So he's the one that actually told me about the redshift. Yeah.
And so they have experienced this physically, or is this just theoretical, or they know that it exists? Like
the technology?
Yes.
I believe that the technology not only exists, we've figured out how to play with it, but I'm not going to really get into that here. That is what we're doing at my company, though. That is the announcement. So Steve Justice was head of advanced programs at the Skunk Works, and the Skunk Works are who built, you know, the famous secret bases you hear about. Skunk Works did, you know, the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, the F-117 stealth fighter, and
it's all Groom Lake out there.
All
right?
that kind of stuff, and he literally was in charge of all the advanced programs. So, you know, you got the boss, and you got him, and he came. He just finished his career over there within the past 2 months, I think it is, and he was on stage with me when we came out and said we're going to be building one of these things.
So when you say that all this technology exists, have they explained this to you, or have you seen it physically?
Oh, I haven't seen anything physically like that. I wouldn't be allowed to go anywhere if that does or doesn't exist.
So they've just explained to you that this exists, and that this is in the hands of the U.S. government.
I think no. I don't want to get into that kind of stuff, but if you don't mind.
Well, why is it that you want to not get into certain things?
Well, I don't want to speak. You know, I represent more than myself these days.
Right.
So I definitely have to watch what I say.
Well, who do you represent when you say you represent more than yourself?
The team that I'm with. So when you look at the people that are a part of my company, it's Undersecretary of Defense and Senior Intelligence Service.
Is there a list of these people, like, that we could see?
Oh, yeah. I thought you guys would have had that.
Yeah, but I mean, is there like a list where folks could see it online?
Yeah, they can go to tothestarsacademy.com and scroll down, and you'll be able to see who they all are. So
how did you get linked up with all these people?
That story might be a better way to start, because a lot of people don't know this part of the story. I think you're going to find it pretty fucking odd as well. But okay, so we'll back up a couple years. So I was obviously, you know, I started the band Blink, and Blink went places, and then, but we always had a weird band relationship.
Wait a minute, is this the guy from Blink 182? And now he has a company called To The Stars? Wait a minute. I knew this motherfucker was looking kind of familiar, but I didn't know who the fuck he was, because he's talking some really weird shit. Hold on.
Okay, so we'll back up a couple years.
So how did you get linked up with all these people?
Is this the guy from Blink 182?
A better way to start, because a lot of people don't know this part of the story. I think you're going to find it pretty fucking odd as well. But okay, so we'll back up a couple years. So I was obviously, you know, I started the band Blink, and Blink went places, and then but we always had a weird band relationship, like most bands, and we also thought that we would never be big, so we started companies on the side, and I had a company that incubated a lot of small startups, like software and apparel and hardcore skate surf companies and stuff like that. Well, I learned a lot from that, and I pulled out an entertainment startup called To The Stars, and I knew I was going to be doing kind of like science fiction franchised stories, just like Disney, but science fiction for adults. And what that means is, you know, I make a story, I title it, I brand it, and I put out the book, and I put out the merchandise, and I go make a movie, you know, and it's a vertically integrated kind of model. Well, one of the stories I knew I wanted to put out was Secret Machines, which was kind of a historical fiction, but based on real events about the UFO phenomenon. But I also knew that I knew shit that most people don't know, because I've studied it for so long, and I happen to put some pieces together that most people don't put together. So before I came out with that book, and before I came out with the plan to take that, make major motion pictures and all that kind of stuff, I knew I needed to ask permission. So I flew around to places. I can't say who they were, but they listened to my pitch, and then I got a email out of nowhere that says meet us next to the Pentagon at this day and time, and I did that. And from that,
you got an email from just a random person?
No, I just can't tell you who it was from.
Okay.
And so then I go out.
Meet you next to the Pentagon? So you just flew to the Pentagon?
I flew out to Pentagon City. Yeah. It's dude, this gets.
Were you freaking out?
I'll tell you when I started freaking out. There's more shit. It gets way worse. This is nothing. So that started me out near DC, taking some other high-level meetings, and there's somebody at a very high level that closed the door, looked me in the eye, and says, "Okay, I'm going to introduce you to somebody." And that person comes to San Diego, puts me on the phone with a general, and the general is listening to my little stump speech about what I want to do with this franchise, because I definitely didn't want to, you know, I wasn't looking to like force disclosure, and I wasn't looking to be rogue and break secrets. I was like, look, I know what's going on here, and you guys are doing a kick-ass job, and I would have done the exact same thing should I have been the guy at the top that had to make some really hardcore decisions 70 years ago. So I want to support you. I think people are cynical because there's a vacuum. You guys can't say what you're doing. So all these people are just coming up with a bunch of bullshit to say, oh, you know, they don't want us to know, or we can't handle it, or it's all about oil and money and all this weird shit.
But you would put these pieces together independently.
I did.
And so based on books that you read?
Yeah, people think that like places like the CIA and the DIA, all these intelligence organizations have, you know, a monopoly on information. They don't. They get their information from the real world too. You know, they do have access to you know, archives of information. They do have access to some amazing, you know, satellite data and stuff like that. But if you're smart and you take your time, you know where to look, and you find patterns, you can pretty much put together all the same shit they can. Kind of, you know, and that's what I did. And so when I pitched what I wanted to do, he said, come up and meet me tomorrow. And so I flew up to NASA, actually, NASA Ames, and had a 2-hour meeting there. And after 2 hours, that person says, he looks me in the eyes, I'm going to introduce you to someone else. And he did. And so I got on the phone with this person, and this person, you know, go, I'm a skeptic. And then at the end of the conversation, he goes, fly out and see me. And so I did. And that's when things really started happening. So I fly out to this airport, and I sit at a table in a restaurant at the airport. No one's in there. And this gentleman sits down, and the waiter comes up. He waves off the waiter, and he looks me in the eye and says, it was the Cold War, and we found a life form. And that's when I started shitting my pants, because I know a lot about this stuff, but you always wait to talk to somebody that is one of the inside people. You always want to have...
So he sits down at a restaurant with you at the airport and tells you that they found a life form.
Yes. And
during the Cold War?
During the Cold War. And everything that they did and every decision they made at the time was because of the consciousness of the Cold War.
And why has this guy decided to meet with you at an airport?
Because the only way you meet with these people, the only way you ever would have anyone talk to you is if you can provide a service that they need. Mm-hmm. And my service was pretty interesting to them, because I said, look, you guys, you know, you struggle with saying disclosure. You want to tell everybody everything, which I don't think everyone should know everything. And then you say, they can't handle it, so don't tell them anything, you know. And I'm like, there's a middle road there. And here's the way I would do the middle road. And it resonated with them, you know. And so we had a pretty epic conversation for like 2 hours.
Why you? Like, why? What is it about what your message was?
Because
what your idea was that made them want to tell you some top secret shit that they've tried to keep away from the American people. Well, I mean, you take a guy who's like a big celebrity who's in a huge rock band like you, and you just say, hey, meet me in an airport. I'm going to tell you about a life form that we found during the Cold War, because you're famous or because you know things?
No, because I have a service. So it's not, it sounds easy when you play it like that, but
service?
A service. Like, what can you do for them that they need help with?
And what could you do?
Communication. They don't have a way to make a movie, a book. They don't know how. Don't have a way to make documentaries. They don't have a way to go on a big show like this and communicate with young people. They don't do that, and nor should they. They look at, you got to look at what they're doing.
So they look to you for a spokesperson role?
I wouldn't say spokesperson role.
Communication role?
A communication role. It makes more sense.
So they would give some information to you, and you would get it out to people. And now, why wouldn't they do it themselves? Because they wouldn't have the same platform.
They don't have
access to the same platform
that
you would have.
And the other reason is people have tried to do movies and stuff like this, but none of them know. I was fortunate enough to know the core story. And most people don't.
So explain that then, if you don't mind going back. Like, sure. You said that you were able to put things together that other people weren't. What are those things?
Essentially, it's the book Secret Machines, where you have a lot of private finance, you have some world bankers, and you have a lot of people internationally working together to figure out a plan of how to push back against something that's been coming here for a very long time, but using off-the-books finances and using mechanisms that we're not totally aware exist. And what people have to realize is, you know, the UFO phenomenon isn't a phenomenon. There's the universe is fucking gigantic, and there's life everywhere, every fucking where, and there's a lot of life that's way more advanced than we are. And just like Voyager left our solar system a little dinky satellite from the 70s, and just like my company's going to be building, you know, this electromagnetic craft that really can do the same thing to time that I've been telling you about. Other civilizations have that too, which means you can traverse those distances of space. And what you have to think about is what happened when we first discovered that, and what did we do about it? And there's no, you know, you got to look at 47 in a very peculiar way. 90 days after the Roswell event, the CIA was created, the Air Force was separated from the Army, the National Security Act was created, and all those things are mechanisms to start learning more and to start getting private industry off the ground.
So that had nothing to do with World War II. You think it had to do with aliens?
Oh, I absolutely think it. Well, both, because what I believe crashed at Roswell was, well, I believe it was German from Argentina, but it had hallmarks and technology based on alien technology. So we put out a story saying it's alien, and then we put out a story saying it's a weather balloon. But the real thing it was, we didn't want anyone to guess, and that's why we put those two things out there. And that's kind of how they do it. I think they did that with the moon. It's like, you know, we went to the moon, and then they put out this meme kind of thing, like, we didn't go to the moon, but they didn't want people really going, well, what's on the moon? That, you know, so these things are managed until they can figure it out, because you got a bunch of normal dudes in suits sitting at a big table like this, and it's their fucking responsibility to figure this thing out. And this shit is monumentally big.
So how would they manage this then? How these regular dudes without access to communication like you have, how have they managed to disseminate this information and sort of confuse everybody?
I think, well, I can tell, I don't know how they did it. I do know that they infiltrated UFO groups. That was the very first thing they did in the 50s.
Sort of like how FBI agents and undercover cops infiltrated Occupy Wall Street and pretended to be radical hippies and started fights.
Yep, they did that. They get access to what the civilians are learning, how information transfers from one group to another, and then they start deflecting all their knowledge and putting in leaks and this and that, and getting them off the main track, not because of disdain for citizens and not because of any other reason than picture ISIS. We don't know what ISIS is. They got a nuclear bomb, and we caught a guy trying to sneak in this bomb. Right. Are they going to stop and come sit on your couch and tell you all about it? No. And if you're like on the radio and there's all these people going, oh my God, we're going to die, a bomb, a bomb, a bomb. They'll hold up a second. You know, you're not going to fucking die, but we need to learn more about this, and we got to figure it out before we sit down and talk to you about it.
So what was the connection, though, specifically that you had figured out, that they knew that you had figured out, that other people hadn't put together?
Well, let me go back to my story. So I put out this book, and this book deals with...
what's the book called again?
Secret Machines. And it deals with secret, international finance, private industry, a secret space program, and a bunch of other things.
And how'd you research this book?
What do you mean?
How'd you get the information?
It's just 25 years of reading shit and watching videos and studying physics and studying, the secrecy acts and all that kind of weird shit. You put it together, and a lot of it's bad information, but after a long time, I just realized what was going on. I studied enough of international finance, some mechanisms that happened after World War II, what the Nazis were doing technologically that no one really talks about to this day. They were 100 years ahead of us about what their guys did at the end of the war in South America. And the paperclip. Paperclip was like, there's two levels of paperclip. Paperclip is the operation that brought over all these ex-Nazis into NASA and into all of our aerospace programs. Why did we do that? Well, because they knew some shit that was very important. And we said there might be a bigger issue out there to deal with, so why don't we side with the devil or side with someone bad because there might be a devil out there. It's that kind of thinking. So they come in.
I thought it was about competing with Russia to try to advance rocketry.
I believe that there was I believe that there's a reason why the Cold War never got hot. Is because we were working with Russia on this specific issue.
You think the reason why the Cold War never turned into an actual war, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So it had nothing to do with the fact that Russia was a communist empire and essentially we outspent them and they really went under and collapsed.
Yeah, but there's different levels. It's like when someone goes, the U.S. government did this. Well, what do you mean? What does that mean? Does that mean the CIA did it, or the DOD did it, or Homeland Security did it? Mm-hmm. You're dealing with it's $1 trillion organization. It's like if somebody in Apple leaks an iPhone, are you going to say, oh my God, Apple's like, well, shit, we're a $800 billion company. We have so many things going on worldwide. It's impossible to say the entire organization believes one thing, and the government's the same kind of way. It's just like, that's just a word. The U.S. government's 2 words, right? 3 words? How do we want to count this? Okay.
United States government.
Three.
Yes.
Okay.
U.S. is.
Got a calculator? Figure this shit out. But and you have many layers of what's going on, and so you have some people worried on technology, some people worrying about what's happening to the civilian population. You have some people worrying about how to keep everything afloat, how to keep everything going. And you have a whole bunch of weird military excursions, and they're bumping into each other, and all these people aren't read in to what's going on with the UFO thing. So as all that shit...
So who gets read in?
That's a good question. If I had to guess, very, very senior technical brass and rock stars. And I wasn't read in, trust me.
No? They didn't tell you anything?
No, they possibly did, but I wasn't read in. I wasn't brought into a skiff and they said this is what's going on, even though I've been in a skiff a few times.
Okay.
You know what a skiff is?
A boat?
A skiff is a special compartmentalized information facility.
Oh,
it's where top secret shit can be discussed.
Oh, I thought maybe they talk on boats because nobody can hear you.
They do that too.
In the middle of the rowboat.
They do that. They actually do, because you can sweep for bugs on boats a lot easier than you can on a boat.
Makes sense. Yeah. So they tell you what?
Okay, so I'm sitting at that restaurant. And
he says he found a life form. They found a life form during the Cold War.
Right, and I said,
where'd they find it?
Oh, I didn't ask him that question.
Really?
Many places. I did one time bring up. I said, I'm thinking about talking about the crash in the late '40s, and they go, "Why just that one?" That was the answer. So I had to figure out a language to talk to these guys.
Did you ever think maybe this guy's bullshitting you, or is he a crazy person?
Fuck no.
No.
I'll tell you guys. That's why you got to hear the whole story.
Okay.
So. Okay, so I'm sitting with them. We talk about a lot of things. I bring up the incidents with our nuclear weapons. I bring up the incidences, a few other things that I want to get into. And he goes, "What do you need to do your project? What are you looking for?" And I said, "Well, I need advisors. I need people that are from different areas in the government, because everyone has their own perspective. You have people at the National Reconnaissance Office that have a perspective based on the satellite feeds they're getting, and these things are coming in and out of the atmosphere. Then you also have people from the agency that are worried about and collecting information of what's going on with people in different countries and here. But then you also have engineers that have a perspective on how the technology is made and what that might mean, because there's a lot of consciousness stuff that falls in this category."
Can I stop you right there? So there's satellites that track them coming in and out of the atmosphere?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
What kind of satellites are these?
I don't know. Usually forward-looking infrared, but I don't know what spectrum of the infrared they're looking at.
So there's some sort of a camera or some sort of a detection device that they have in the atmosphere just to check for UFOs?
I don't know if it's just for UFOs. They can pick up very, very specific heat signatures, and they have algorithms, because what you have is a satellite is a device that can pick up what you program it to pick up. Now, you put a sensor on there, but you got to tell the sensor what to do.
Right.
So if the sensor says, "Look, something traveling at this speed with this kind of heat," you got to record that. You got to focus on it, and that's what we call an ICBM. But if something comes in and zigzags, stops, and turns left, and it's traveling 10 times faster than that, we need you to record that and focus in on that as well. But if something just is moving low and it's only going 300 miles an hour and it has these big wings and a low whatever, it's just a plane, so what it captures is based on how it's programmed in the first place. But
so it can differentiate between meteorites and spaceships.
Yeah, absolutely. So
how often are these things coming into our atmosphere?
Oh shit, I don't know, but I've had quite a few discussions. One of the people I've been in contact. One of my advisors was from the National Reconnaissance Office, high up, and they call it episodic visits. That's all I know.
Episodic, meaning like they have time periods where they like.
I saw a paper where they
semesters.
I figured out the Department of Defense figured out a physicist there, an algorithm of how to compute when the things fly in and collect smaller ships, like motherships, small ships, at what longitude and latitude, and what essentially what orbit it would land at when it would collect these other machines, and so they tested that, and all I know is it was successful.
So you think this is happening on a very frequent basis?
Well, let me tell you the rest of the story.
Okay.
So and it's important because you'll see. So he goes, "What do you need?" I said, "I need advisors." And then, so next thing you know, I leave, and 2 weeks later, bam, 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 my email starts. I have all these admirals, all these generals. No intelligence people other than brass that were connected with the National Reconnaissance Office. But National Reconnaissance Office is half Air Force and half CIA. But they're all military. And so I start talking to them. I start meeting with them. I fly out to Colorado Springs, and there's a general and a colonel, and they look at me and they said, "Okay, do you need anything else? Are you good?" And I said, "Well, I think you guys should talk to the Defense Intelligence Agency." And they go, "Why?" I just don't want to upset them. I want to make sure everyone's kosher with what I'm about to do. And the colonel looks at me and he goes, "Do you ask your dad for permission after your mom's already given it to you?" And I go, "No." And he's all, "You've been given permission, shut the fuck up and get to work." And I was like, "All right." So I did. So I go out and I put the book out there and I start doing national radio, like the Art Bell, so Coast to Coast, Georgia, I do all that stuff. Next thing you know, I get approached by somebody at a certain agency. And that guy comes to San Diego and puts me in a small room. And I got what you would call interrogated for 2 days straight, saying, "We need to know who the fuck you are. You know shit you shouldn't know." And
so what specifically should you not have known?
The book, what's in the book, everything I've been telling you today. When you're dealing with, there is a concerted international effort to deal with this stuff, and that was in my book. And it's not like Roswell crashed, and it was not like, like all the typical UFO shit that people dwell on isn't the story. It's just that there's something crashed, or someone got abducted and saw this, or someone pulled a little piece of metal out of their body, but no one's put together what we're doing about it. Because our countrymen since World War II aren't stupid.
But what set them off, though? Like, what was the thing that you said that you should not have known?
In my book, it is my belief that we have an incredible, we've made incredible strides creating assets to deal with this stuff. That's my belief, and I'm not speaking for my company. It's just
assets.
Yeah.
Mean some sort of a government agency that's been designed or put together, international?
International.
Okay, so some sort of an international collaboration to deal with the threat of alien life. And that was enough that they pulled you aside and wouldn't let you go for 2 days and just interrogated you?
So it was it was an interrogation, but it was a pretty heavy debriefing of how I got to where I was. And it's not like they didn't let me go home. This took place at a hotel near my home.
But they made you sit down and talk to them?
Oh, fuck yeah. There was 6 of them, I think, 6.
And so they let you leave and go to sleep and then come back, get something to eat and
came back, spent another 8 hours, because I wasn't rogue. I wasn't, like, trying to hide anything. I was trying to explain to them.
How did you have all this free time, though?
What do you mean?
I mean, how you have, like, if somebody said, "Hey, we're going to have you in a room, we're going to talk to you for 2 days," I'm like, dude, I don't have 2 days.
Well, that's maybe you don't, but if you do, fuck yeah. When you have these people that want to get a hold of you, you don't run.
I'm not saying run. I'm saying, like, what are you guys looking for? Like, they're going to just sit you down and ask you questions for 2 days because you put together this idea that somehow or another there's some sort of an international collaboration to deal with the threat of alien life?
No, they looked at it. They didn't know. They thought I was Ed Snowden. They thought there was a group of people leaking me classified information.
They didn't know that you're from Blink-182? They didn't know that you're like a huge
They don't care about
rock star?
That's what they don't understand. They don't care about who I am. They just care about the material.
Right, but it should take them like 3 seconds to realize, like, you're not Edward Snowden. You're a rock star.
But I'm saying some pretty provocative shit. You got to realize no one else has gone up there and talked about, you know, once again, I'm in a tricky spot right now because a lot of what happened back then, you know, I can't really get into now because of the positions and the things I'm involved with. But read the book. And
so it's just because you printed the stuff in the book that they wanted to pull you aside and talk to you about this for 2 days.
And I was all over radio and talking about it, and I was saying some other crazy shit that I can't repeat. So people listening, if they want to go back and look at those interviews, that's a better way to...
Okay, so you had said something in those interviews that you can't say again because they told you to stop talking about it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did they tell you to stop talking about the fact that you can't talk about it?
No, I mean, I don't think that's the issue. The more of the issue was, what are you trying to achieve?
Right.
And once they found out who I was working with, they were like, holy shit. And they only found that out when WikiLeaks broke into John Podesta's emails, and I was having video conferences and conference calls with, he was Obama's senior advisor at the time. So the Wall Street Journal broke the story, like, what's this rock star talking about UFOs with Hillary Clinton's campaign manager?
Mm-hmm.
No, he was Obama's senior advisor, so it had nothing to do with Hillary, you know. So we were setting these up, and when that broke, I had to call up my partner from the CIA, and I said, you know, I got to say, now I can talk to you a little bit more about who these people are, and that's where I gained a really large amount of credibility with them, but also where they realized that we got to figure out a better way to do this. And what you see is me and some very important people coming together to do something that I think is really beneficial to society. But we have a lot of work to do because a lot of people they don't know what to think of it. At first they thought I was nuts when I was talking about my book. I'm all, oh, I got these advisors, you know. And then all of a sudden the Wall Street Journal broke this story, and there's all these multi-star generals and head of some really big aerospace companies, and then the big news organizations were like, holy shit, this might be real. A lot of kids still don't know, and they're having fun on the internet. And then I came out a couple weeks ago on stage with all these people, and now it's like, now all the big, huge, I'm dealing with some crazy, big mainstream press that we're trying to keep at bay for a variety of reasons. But yes, it's all true. And what To the Stars is really after is how do we bring the public in on this and work together to communicate and educate this stuff? How do we bring the technology out of the shadows and build it for the world? And how do we tell the story in documentaries, nonfiction, fictional works over a period of years? And if we do that, the public owns it, the public has a say, they're a part of it, and then people will start to understand over time why they did what they did. They didn't lie to people just out of like ego. They were like, okay, there's this group called ISIS, and they're here, and we need to understand them, and we need to fucking figure it out quick. But the problem is, these are extraordinarily advanced civilizations that have been coming here forever. That's why it's all in all the ancient fucking scripts and texts and carved into rocks and all that shit. But trying to figure it out, trying to connect the dots, and looking at debris that they probably still have in a warehouse, going, we have no fucking clue how to make this or back engineer this stuff. I mean, there's a piece of metal from a crash that I've seen, and I've seen the science on it, and it's atomically aligned, and it's layered in like 80 layers within just a few microns of purities of metal that aren't even in our solar system. And they think it needs to be made in an area where there's no gravity. So number one, it has to be made in space. Number two, even if we were to create a machine that can potentially do some of this stuff, 3D printing layers of different metals of obscene purities, it would cost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't even have that.
Why do they think it was made without gravity?
Because I think it's the atomic structure. So what happens is when you radiate it with terahertz, it loses mass. Something weird. It resonates some kind of harmonic, and then it gets lighter. And if you hit it with enough terahertz, it'll float. So we're going to be showing people this stuff. We're going to be bringing out the hardware, some of the hardware. We're going to be bringing out implants. We're going to be bringing out videos. We're going to be bringing out.
So you're going to be showing people this actual physical piece of metal that was constructed in a zero gravity environment in space, and if you hit it with enough energy, it becomes weightless.
I wouldn't say weightless. I don't know if we can make enough energy to do that, But yes, that is our plan, and show the experiment. So
okay, well, if you can't give it enough energy to make it weightless, can you give it enough energy to reduce the mass?
Yes.
So it weighs less?
Yes.
And you can prove this?
Yes, and that's why...
So you can have a scale, and you can put this piece of metal on a scale.
I'll do you better. It's not even that. It's warping the space-time continuum around the object. So you shoot... What you can do is you can shoot an electron over it while it's not
a
being
single electron?
And you collect it and time that.
How do you shoot a single electron?
Fuck if I know. I'm not a physicist. They just do this shit. That's what they do. So, and I was actually on a phone call today about it. I talked for about 45 minutes in the car on the way up here about some of the.
How would they even be able to regulate whether or not they have a single electron?
They're doing crazier shit than that at CERN. At CERN, they're taking particles of atoms and they're speeding them up to light speed. Almost light speed. Yeah, and slamming them into each other. So I'm not too worried about electrons. Electrons and photons.
An enormous building that's, I think it's
3 miles.
GM employee program participants for the current GM lease can get this low mileage.
Some of the.
How would they even be able to regulate whether or not they have a single electron?
Well, fuck, they're doing crazier shit than that at CERN. At CERN, they're taking particles of atoms and they're speeding them up to light speed.
Almost light speed.
Yeah, and slamming them into each other. So I'm not too worried about electrons. Electrons and photons.
An enormous building that's, I think it's CERN's like 10 miles in the world.
Yeah, but you've seen an electron microscope, right? It's like the size of half of the
Right, but I'm saying they're launching a single electron at this thing.
I think that's what they do. Yeah, they do that with photons too. By the way, I read a really cool study about single photons, and consciousness was interacting with it. Just by thinking, it was changing the way the photon went. It's crazy. So what happens is you shoot this electron, and you know how fast it is to travel over this piece of metal. Then you radiate it with terahertz, and then
what does that mean? Radiate it with terahertz?
You're electrifying and charging the piece of material.
Do you know what's a terahertz?
It's a high frequency wave. I don't want to pretend I know that much about it. I just know that the earlier tests were with radio waves like RF, and they need to do terahertz. So I don't know much more than that.
So by
shooting terahertz at it, the piece of metal can lose mass. And then when you shoot an electron over it, it'll be a different time than the other one when it's not turned on. Does that make sense?
No.
The time it takes for an electron to go over the piece of metal.
What's that, Jamie?
This is why I type in terahertz imaging.
Laser-guided codes, advanced single-pixel terahertz imagery. And this B, the image is sampled upon instructions from a laser. A, the terahertz light passes through the object, and then C, the information is collected to reconstruct the image.
Look at that. So with this stuff,
it's just an imaging technology.
But you're timing how fast it takes an electron to move over the surface of the metal. Then you charge the metal, and then you're timing the exact same thing, and there will be different times. And the positive result is that it lost mass, so it traveled faster or slower or whatever the hell is supposed to happen.
And so I would imagine that this piece of metal, if it exists, would be kind of game over. If you brought this piece of metal to the most advanced scientists in metallurgy or whatever they would be that would understand this kind of shit.
Yeah, and it's already been there, but the problem is
there anywhere online where people can read about this?
There actually is. There's some of this stuff, not this piece in particular. They came out as arts parts on Artsbell a long time ago, and they're different layers of bismuth and magnesium. But this one came from a crash in full.
All right, guys, I'm about to get out of here. About to go grab me something to eat. Peace.